Hello there. This is a very, very unique episode of this podcast. Is all I'm going to say without spoiling too much. Let's just say it's very much an episode of two halves. So what you hear at the start may not reflect how things are going at the end. Don't worry, everything is more than okay. It's actually quite fabulous, if you don't mind me saying so. This episode, as always, is brought to you by our lovely backers over at patreon.com/howtowrestling, where if you join now, you get access to a decade's worth of pay-per-view reviews from WWE, AEW, as well as our pay-per-view classic series, where if you're into the NWO thing, as you have clicked on this episode, whole bunch of WCW stuff there, including NWO Sold Out 1998 and all of its garbage truck glory, Uncensored 1996, etc. A whole lot more there from all various different companies and different walks of wrestling life. Get access to all of that as well as our Totally Divas series. For only $5, you get access to the entire back catalogue and you can drop out whenever you like to. Thank you to everyone who's supported us so far on this podcast and on this journey. And stick around at the end. There might be a reveal of sorts. But whose side are they on? Greetings, friend, and welcome to an episode of How to Wrestling, the world's first podcast detailing how to wrestling, how to get into wrestling, how to understand wrestling, and goodness knows, maybe even how to enjoy wrestling for life, that is. Hello once again, it's me, your old pal, Hollywood Kevin Mann, joined as I am always by the lady who's currently doing a whole lot of gang signs around the house.
Oi.
It's my better half and the extremely pregnant Joe Graham.
Hello.
How you doing today, Joe?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
That is a brazen lie worthy of Hulk Hogan. 38 weeks pregnant. Fine. It's all right. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
I'm suffering.
You're okay?
I'm fine, yeah.
It's been an interesting road, this watching for the NWO, because I
Yeah.
believe currently being late in third trimester as you are,
Yeah.
you both have kind of a small window when you can actually do stuff.
Yes.
And that, the thing is, it ended up us watching perhaps the most amount of
A lot
wrestling.
of NWO.
If you were to estimate how many hours of NWO we've watched, including the nightly nitros that were going on as well.
Including the Nightly Nitros.
I mean, we had to see some of the nightly nitros.
Because without the Nightly Nitros, it's like 8 hours.
Yeah.
And including the Nightly Nitros, I don't know.
Maybe 800 hours,
Yeah,
thereabouts. Not sure if
it's
the
a lot.
WCW ran that long. Today we are talking about a group and a storyline that has not just been labelled as one of the greatest stories in the history of wrestling, one of the greatest factions in the history of wrestling, and responsible for having an impact on everything from the way wrestling is shot to the way wrestling stories are told, to even the great culture of America and beyond itself, but it's also been labelled as something that killed wrestling, killed one of the greatest wrestling organizations on earth, and set in stone a lot of tropes that were bad or worse than bad for wrestling stories from that point onwards. The reality is somewhere in between. Today, Joe, we're talking about the New World Order.
New World Order.
Or the NWO, as it's also known. What was your knowledge base of this group before we settled in to a lot of late 90s watching from Atlanta?
I feel like with the NWO, I knew more than usual when it comes to the subject matter of this podcast, but also less.
I mean, because you have done episodes with me about most of the main players.
Yeah.
The main trio that people associate with this group, Hollywood Hogan,
Yeah.
Scott Hall, Kevin Nash,
yeah.
and their little buddy,
And Bischoff,
Eric
yeah.
Bischoff, the executive vice president of WCW at the time. But I do actually recall the NWO being one of the very first things in wrestling that made you, like, in the middle of a show go, fuck, what the fuck is, fuck this.
Really?
Like one of the moments that made me go, perhaps the honeymoon period is over vis-a-vis wrestling, and we'll just be lovely partners who maybe don't enjoy this great sport together.
When was that?
It was the WrestleMania that had Sting versus Triple H, which you were very middling about.
Oh,
And
old NWO.
And then we did a Sting episode, which made you be furious about that match instead. And the NWO came out in the middle of that, and they helped Sting, and they fought DX, and
Yep.
the Six didn't know where to stand in the whole business.
Because it was just a bunch of old men standing around.
Yes.
And they made out as well that Triple H was in the NWO.
No, they didn't.
No?
No.
In my mind, he's been added to that lineup and he was there as well.
Yeah, he was part of the DX, and they did like a DX versus NWO face-off all these years later. You know, and it was one of those things, I guess, where it showed that in wrestling, when you reach that kind of legendary status of like, you know, of a group or something that's very iconic, like the NWO, what the actual group was really about and what it did and its story kind of almost feels surplus to requirements. I feel the NWO is kind of invoked a lot as like a cool image or something that's very iconic looking and seeming. But in terms of the nuts and bolts of the story and the beats along the way, I kind of feel like often wrestling fans, I'm including myself amongst them, don't really know what the group was about and what the story was about and what it kind of achieved.
It's a bit long and meandering, I think, the story.
It is a story that does not have a proper end, I guess, is something we should say right at the start.
It's hard to summarize.
Yeah,
like, we've just watched like everything there is to know about NWO, and we've read books about it as well.
Yeah.
And I couldn't summarize the story of the end of. It's so meandering.
Okay, if you couldn't summarize the very meandering story that has several false ends and several repeated beats along the way, what was the NWO in kayfabe, as it were, in the fake wrestling parlance of our times? What was this New World organization all about, brother?
It was these cool bad guys who came into a company that was family friendly and marketed to families and children. And then these cool guys come in and they're rude and bad, but that means they're cool and sexy.
Very sexy.
And then they take over.
Okay.
That's I think as brief a elevator pitch as you're going to get.
I think so, yeah. An outsider group coming in to fuck up with the wrestling company that you know.
Yeah.
And
It's like the cool, sexy older brother coming in to the younger brother.
Why you don't look at me in the eyes when you're saying that?
Comparisons to you and your brother.
If this is the first episode he listens to, I'll be really pissed off.
Oh
now.
Man, divorces on both fronts. No, but you know what I mean. It's like the older teenage brother. I think is the demographic for the NWO.
Definitely, yeah.
And then
the young adult male probably will squeeze into that as well.
And then the young brother who watches, Disco Inferno. Is that his name?
Yeah, Joe, that's some of the horrible side effects, folks, just watching all this WCW. Joe's like, that Disco Inferno, he's a great lad.
I like him.
He's fun. He does dancing. I'm like, why can't you just like Alex Wright like a normal woman?
I like Alex Wright too. But yeah, that poor little boy is like shoved out of the way by the two bullies, Hall and Nash.
It is often kind of pointed as being like a reflection as to how society was, how pop culture and culture at large was, particularly in America at the time, that we had this 90s rejection of the wholesome good guy, of the easy story of, the superhero and the supervillain. I guess epitomized by the fact that the man who's telling you to take your vitamins and say your prayers was now talking about that he did it for the money and those vitamins were steroids, brother, but you can't prove it. So I'm wondering, like, because you're a child of the 90s, although you grew up, you were born in 1990.
Yeah, so maybe I'm a truer child of the 90s.
Perhaps,
or maybe less true.
I had a couple of years of the 80s to indulge myself in, but was that something that you noticed in culture, I guess, at the time? Like, 'cause it's weird when you grow up and it's all like rude and crude. You don't really notice it, I guess, as a rejection of what came before.
I think because I was a bit younger than you, I didn't see the culture change.
Yeah.
For me, the culture was always green slime and getting back at your parents. That was the culture of the 90s.
And the NWO hated parents.
And they loved slime. They didn't
You're going to get your own back, Chico. Let me tell you.
They didn't have as much slime in the NWO.
They didn't. No, the NWO. There was never any black and white slime. It's strange, isn't it?
Or even the classic green slime. I think they could have pulled it off.
Bischoff was put in a dunk tank at one point, but
really?
But other than that, no, we didn't have a
slime in.
No, just water. Nature's
Rubbish.
most boring of slimes,
Rubbish.
unfortunately.
Now, what I want to know is, as the little boy who loved watching wrestling in the 90s, and I think you liked the pure stuff of the WWF, didn't you? Yeah,
I mean,
right?
no, not really. No, I was a child of the Attitude Era.
Just as soon as you got in, it was Attitude Era.
Yeah, I mean,
all the
I
way.
started watching in kind of like early to mid 1998, which was firmly
Steve
Austin's on the
Austin, yeah.
rise and all that. And I do remember seeing wrestling in like 1991 or 1990. It was genuinely one of my earliest memories. I think of now is that it, a bit of like classic golden age, Hulkamania wrestling was on telly, and I was like, oh, the Ultimate Warrior's been put in a body bag or whatever it is by the Undertaker, and my parents being like, that's bad and it's laughable and it's a joke. And like, I will be so ashamed of you if you get into this. Like, and that's really funny because like I like carry that with me for ages. Then as being like, oh, that's all this stuff is like I hate the Power Rangers.
So
when I
you're
was a
not
kid
even
as
being
well.
bullied by your older brother at this point. You're being bullied by your parents. Your parents are Hall and Nash in this scenario.
It's like, look how unrealistic. Because they're like, look how unrealistic it is. And so I remember like my first few months of watching wrestling in the late 90s, even though it was unquestionably cool at the time. I was there with my arms folded, being like, oh, is this Steve Austin lad? Is he really a badass, is he? Like, how come his punches don't hit the other guy? I was so contrarian about it. And it wasn't that my parents, like, sitting you down and be like, hey, little boy, never watch this. It was just me coming in and seeing the adults mocking this thing as being cartoonish and silly. And that is kind of, I think, where we found wrestling in that mid-90s period. I think if I'd been born 5 years earlier, I'd have been all over that era of wrestling.
My question then is, because I know you also grew up not liking WCW.
Oh, fuck me, man. I hated that shit.
Now, does that mean you were on board with the idea of the NWO? Or is that something you've kind of had to come around to more as an adult?
I was very unaware of what it was. I didn't really know that it was this kind of group whose purpose was to destroy the parent organization. Because I was, someone who grew up with, the Ministry of Darkness, the corporation, the corporate ministry, the job squad, the union, DX, the McMahon-Helmsley faction. There was just factions all the time. So I just assumed it was like a faction like any other.
Right.
And it was only later when they brought in kind of a revamped version of it into the WWE, I was like, oh, this is cool. And it's funny because right now I'm doing SmackDown Crawl with Adam on the Attitude Era podcast Patreon, and we've just hit the point where the NWO has come back into the WWE, their version of it. And because you and I have watched hundreds of hours of real NWO, now I think that's the worst. I'm like, no, it's wrong. It's so wrong. It's so wrong. Why
Purist.
are they? Yeah, like it's like that's not what it is, and that kind of really shows like how different the NWO is really to what I think a lot of fans just kind of assume it is. Because you watch like a WWE documentary, it gives you this kind of impression that it's this kind of cool faction and we had some fun times, but WCW sucked so bad that it couldn't overcome that, and that's why it failed.
Oh, I see.
Because I hated WCW for the most ridiculously long time. Even after I started podcasting, listen to my Starrcade 1997 review from like 2013, and me and there with my arms folded. And now I'm like, that's one of my favorite shows ever. Like, even with all the problems it entails.
You were hating it for something that you now love.
Yes.
It wasn't a case of you hated it for something that it was no longer.
Yeah, and I think what's very interesting about this NWO story is that we're living in an era now, Joe, where you have like, say like the Bloodline, and I think it was like 3 years ago, Paul Heyman said at a press conference, he was like, we're at the beginning of the first scene of Act 1 of the 10-act structure of the Shakespearean format, and it's all lined up, and we were like, yeah, right. And here we are all these years later.
A decade later now.
Yeah.
We're all old. My baby's 10.
But this was a story where it's like, here's a huge fucking idea.
Yeah.
We don't really know what it is. And it's full of creative people who all have a different idea of how it should be perceived and how it should be executed. And we go on with that for like 3 or so years. And business is booming. And all of a sudden, business isn't booming. And this story, which we have been telling kind of by the seat of our pants, suddenly doesn't click. It's like going to see a great jazz concert and they're absolutely bopping away and it's fucking amazing. And then out of the blue at the end, it's like...
Okay, that actually leads me on to my next question, because I was wondering, with your comparison of the Bloodline, do you think it's possible to have a storyline in wrestling that goes on for the length of time as we're talking about here, like years, 5 years maybe in some cases, and know all the beats beforehand? Or do you think it is like jazz and that only really ever works if you are learning as you go?
I think there are there are middle grounds to this type of a thing, because this is a story at the NWO where, even though it was kind of, hey, we are making up as we go along, we did have a few major bits and destinations. And I think when this storyline was at its strongest is when we had like, hey, we know that Hulk Hogan is going to fight Sting at some point, and that's going to happen in a year. And having that as a destination is like, okay, and then you could fill in the blanks in between.
Right.
And it's all very exciting. I think we live in an age now where the fan base is so inward looking, and the creative people behind wrestling are so attentive to what the fans say and do. Like, you hear stories of Triple H is like, when he's at a Raw or a pay-per-view, he's just on his phone constantly scrolling, looking at the immediate reaction.
Oh, he's just like Vince McMahon.
And I think even when you do have your big plans in place, as WWE do, I think you can't be as set in stone as one would intend anymore either, because I think there is too much of a listening in on the very noisy fan base who will probably tell you that everything is amazing or everything is crap, and regardless of its quality in equal measure. So yeah. So let's go back to 1996 and have a little look at the state of professional wrestling. If you're Joe Graham and you love Bret Hart and Vince McMahon on commentary, boy oh boy, the WWE is the place for you, because it's a family-friendly, wholesome product that has been struggling for a couple of years with the greatest wrestler in the world at the time carrying it all on his back. And even though they had an exodus in the earlier 90s of some of the top, most iconic stars of the 80s and the early 90s, like Hulk Hogan and Macho Man, they did manage to cultivate a new generation of talent. Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, Razor Ramon, the 1-2-3 Kid, etc. But we arrive at a point now in 1996 where even some of those figures have decided that the pay is too low, the dates are too many, and the grind too severe. So they find themselves looking for pastures new. WCW, meanwhile, at the same time, and it's really strange to think about this, because I feel like we've grown up in recent times here in wrestling where if one company is struggling, that means by default the other company is kicking ass.
Oh, right, yeah.
You know, someone has to be doing really well if one of the main companies is struggling.
Yeah.
But in the mid-90s, even though we've had a lot of fun watching some of that great content with the likes of, Vader, etc., WCW was similarly struggling. And one of the main reasons that was because they had hedged their bets on Hulk Hogan coming into the company and having a second run, a second crack of the nostalgia. Randy Savage is there alongside him. But it doesn't seem to really be clicking with fans. Case in point, we reviewed Uncensored 1996 recently over on our Patreon page for Pay-Per-View Classique, which involved a very big series of cages stacked one on top of another.
Not good.
How would you describe the feeling of Hulkamania circa 1996 as you've read it?
Stale and boring.
Yeah.
Just like same old shit.
His heart doesn't seem in it, does it?
No one's honestly, like, the atmosphere in the company at this time felt really kind of sour. Like, just no one really knew what they were doing, and no one seemed to be happy with the direction they were going with, except maybe Ric Flair, who's always happy, like, so long as he's on top.
Unless he's talking about it, then he's like, I've never lost more respect for an organization than WCW in 1996.
But I feel like he's the only one who came across okay on that pay-per-view.
Because I think Rick is interesting, because I think Rick always kind of gave the semblance even when things were bad for him.
Yeah, that's great.
He enjoyed doing what he was doing. But seeing Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage being like, it's a living.
Yeah.
And it feels like it was a company that there were a lot of people drawing paychecks from, but they didn't necessarily think it was going to be there in a few years' time. Pretty much like in a worse situation, I guess, than the WWF was at the time. So the idea of bringing in Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, and Scott was the original kind of person to come over to WCW from this group, it was very much a case of he felt he'd plateaued. He was making as much money as it seemed was possible for him to make. Vince McMahon told him there wasn't anything else he could kind of improve on. There wasn't anything that he could add to his repertoire. And over on the other side, it's like, well, we have some big paychecks coming in from Ted Turner. Do you want to come here, make more money, and work less dates?
He's like, yes, please.
I mean, I would jump at that opportunity. Isn't it crazy to think, like, what it's like now, I guess, in 2026? Because, like, wrestlers...
I know. The
main query now for wrestlers is, are they wrestling enough?
Yes.
I read out to you the other night, it was the Iron Man Award of the wrestler who'd wrestled the most matches in WWE in 2025. and it was like LA Knight, and he had done 60.
That's mad.
And like, you know,
So weird.
there's like wrestlers who said like they went away like for 2 months and they wrestled that many times,
Yeah.
like, or a month and a half. They wrestled twice on Sundays and
Yeah,
twice on
yeah.
Saturdays. So I think the idea of like, this is the thing, right? When I grew up as a wrestling fan, hearing this story, they're like, "Oh, Scott Hall wanted less dates, did he? Did he want to see his kids and his wife? Oh, get out and grind on the roads. Go out and burn your body to the ground." It's like it seems very reasonable
Yeah.
by modern standards.
I think especially compared to the stars of like the generation that would have been before him.
Yeah.
It's the fact that he's looking at his position in the company, and he's looking at the top guys of like a few years earlier, and just the inability to get to that level, even though he's really good.
It's funny to think that this is basically saying if you want to make that type of money, you need to be responsible for a boom period in wrestling.
Yeah.
But what the great thing about the NWO is, no one sat down and was like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to create the next big thing. We're going to create the boom period in wrestling. They were just kind of at the point of like, well, we might as well try something.
Yeah.
You know, we got some new talent coming in. Maybe we got some ideas, you know. And it's not as if Scott Hall was signed by Eric Bischoff and it was like, we're going to do the NWO, brother. This is my idea
Yeah.
of it all laid out. This has many authors. I don't know if you, from all of your viewing of it and your reading on it, would say there's any one person you could say they came up with
Ted
the NWO.
DiBiase. He's the true mastermind.
In kayfabe, this group has many masters, folks. But like in terms of it, in reality, as a shoot, as they say.
Well, like whose idea it is?
Whose idea was it?
It's no, you can't really. I mean, I guess you could maybe distill it down to two ideas, which is Nash and Bischoff, I think, are the two kind of true brains behind it. But like, even that isn't really fair to the contributions of Scott Hall or Hogan.
Yeah, that's funny because, you know, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, they weren't like, we need Hogan. That was a very late addition, and I would argue from my vantage point as a fan, without him. And I'm no fan of the dead racist, but in terms of an intriguing character at this point in time, Jesus Christ, like it is the whole thing in my mind, at the very least.
Even though he's not necessarily like the brains behind it, you can't do it without him.
Yes.
But I think as well, there's a lot of names who have been forgotten to history. And that was the nice thing about reading this book that we've been reading. Say Hello to the Bad Guys.
Yeah, it's a recent book about the NWO. It's very, very good. Well researched.
Very good. And it mentions a lot of the kind of the people behind the scenes who were involved in making the NWO as iconic as it was. Because it really is. It's down to a lot more than just the wrestlers.
The tale that I heard that was as old as time was always, Eric Bischoff just stole this from New Japan. You know, there was an organization in New Japan where it was like, we're a splinter group and we're going to like take it apart and all that stuff. Which I thought was like, that was very intriguing because there was always, you know, pointed like, Bischoff had dealings with New Japan. You know, he did a lot of talent exchange in the mid-90s. New Japan and WCW were kind of linked up in the same way that, say, AEW and New Japan are in 2026.
Yeah.
And it was funny, though, when we did the episode about Tenru, was because this idea of there being like a renegade outsider group.
Yeah.
There was actually, that had happened quite a few times before that. So I just think this very easy idea to be like, this is just stolen from this one idea in Japan. It's like, well, that idea in Japan was probably an idea that there's nothing really wholly original in wrestling.
No.
Although I thought it was very interesting when they did the recent A&E biography episode about the NWO. And then I was like, are they going to have Bischoff admit that he stole this idea from Japan? And he was like, I was working with them in New Japan. And what I noticed was they were doing these events in front of 70,000 people in the Tokyo Dome. And I was like, we should do that. we should try being successful.
That's such a good idea. Why haven't we tried this before?
Yeah, you know, the fans. We should make them really like the wrestling show that we see.
We should make them give us lots of money.
But this weird contrived idea that like the reason why they were selling at the Tokyo Dome in the mid-90s with New Japan was because they wrestled a style that was believable. Ergo, we're going to do the NWO. That was it. Like he was so close to admitting a grain of truth there, and then it was like, what are you talking about, man?
He does say a little bit about how he was inspired by, in particular, the thing that New Japan was doing at the time was they were making the fans doubt what was real.
Yeah.
And they made fans think a lot about like, wait, this thing that we're seeing on screen, is this part of the wrestling show, or is this something that's backstage that we're not supposed to know about?
And I don't think Eric can be. Eric, I think, is a creative guy, but there's a difference between someone who could be sat on a mountaintop and being like, here's a super genius idea. I'm sorry. Just, but like someone who's just like, you know what, here's a genius idea. Bam. And someone else who I think is more like a facilitator of the times and the moment.
Yeah.
Because Eric Bischoff didn't exist in a vacuum.
No.
And I think for him to say that he just sat down one day and was like, we need to be more realistic and bring in a bit more of the real life. When all the time you have, for instance, Vince McMahon doing these skits on WWF television about billionaire Ted.
Yeah, true.
And complaining about all the old wrestlers who are all washed up or all wrestling over in that other company. Now, that's entertainment, sure. But that's also... that's making you go, this wrestling show is saying this not because it's just an entertaining storyline. They're doing this because they're aggrieved at the real-life business practices of their rival.
Yeah.
So I think it's more of a kind of a back and forth of the times. These companies were both at each other. They were both rats rattling around in the ditch, trying because they were both struggling so badly. But the idea that realism was wanted, that was very much like, that was of the times. You had things like The Real World and more reality and television was starting to come out in the fold at that time.
And it's interesting that you say about like wrestling likes to very much credit itself as coming up with something for the first time.
Yes.
And refusing to accept influences from other places.
Yeah.
Because part of the narrative, especially in that A&E documentary you mentioned, is that this idea of the anti-hero came for the very first time from the NWO.
Because you asked me the other night, you were like, when did the anti-hero first come about? And I was like thinking like, well, like, what Cinema Swirl episodes did I do recently? I was like, well, like Dirty Harry, but that's like the 70s. Might do the French Connection soon. That was the earlier 70s.
I mean, you can trace it back to ancient Greece.
Yeah, the anti-hero wasn't like an invention of the 90s by any stretch, but these things are cyclical.
They're cyclical, exactly. Yeah, I mean, because as you mentioned, you've got Dirty Harry in the 70s, like A Clockwork Orange, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of anti-hero stuff in the 70s. I think it was big on trend. Seinfeld came about in 1989.
Yeah.
And then in the late 90s, then I guess you could argue after the NWO, you've got a bit more influences in like movies and TV shows with like HBO. Oz, The Sopranos.
That's funny though, because you have this narrative that always fits in place, which is like the thing that we're talking about that's important. This is the originator of it. Like people will have you believe that Stone Cold Steve Austin was he was the first instance of that in wrestling, and we're talking about a group that existed for full 2 years.
Yeah.
Before Steve Austin was being that proper anti-hero, So I think wrestling is you always have to remember that the people who are telling you these stories are folks who are paid to lie for a living.
That's it, yeah.
And they're also got a lot of fragile egos, and there's so many people who are so adamant that admitting that they were part of a successful creative endeavor as opposed to being like the super genius that really got it off the ground. That's like the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
That would be like a fate worse than death, to be one of the many contributors as opposed to the sole genius who really got it done.
But I would say in the case of the NWO, and this is me just spitballing, but I would argue that instead of it being taken influence from pop culture necessarily like TV and movies, and instead of it influencing those things directly itself, the NWO, I think the biggest influence in terms of anti-heroes would probably come from rap culture.
Oh, yeah, hugely. But yeah, I think that you're very right, like rap culture and like, I guess, pop culture at large, because Hall and Nash were two guys who epitomized the younger generation, and WCW had been given, whether fairly or not, the reputation as being the old guys, old-timey wrestling. They'd been labeled, like they were always labeled as the company, even like in the 80s and the 90s, it was like, oh, they do that old-timey wrestling. And then in the mid-90s, you brought in Hogan and Savage, and you had Ric Flair, so then it was like the old guys.
Yeah.
The old men, they wrestle on that show.
They're ancient, aren't they? They're like 40 or something. Not like LA Knight or Roman Reigns.
LA Knight's catching strays. The oldest man in wrestling and the hardest working man in wrestling. There's no criticism here, unfair or otherwise. But yeah, the idea that you were injecting like a couple of younger fellas who, and that was something that we mentioned in the Hall and Nash episode, that Vince, and even the Shawn Michaels episode, where Vince McMahon was like, tell me how to be young. I don't know anything. And like, well, sometimes we do hand gestures and point at our dicks. And that, whoa, okay. And I think Bischoff saw, particularly in Hall early doors, he's a really creative fellow, this.
Yeah.
And I think of all the people in the NWO, if you want to talk about the one fountain of pure creativity, particularly in the early days, it has to be Scott Hall. I think that's why it was so important that he was first. And his first appearance, that's in many people's minds, it's one of the most memorable things about the NWO. This guy showing up, not telling you who he is, interrupting a wrestling match, and they apparently even tell the wrestlers he was going to come out. Like, no one knew. It was all super secret.
I feel so bad for the wrestlers whose match they interrupted.
Yeah, because they just stop wrestling.
Just leave.
They're like, oh, okay. They like hold us and lay him out. He just like takes the microphone, walks in the ring, and they're like, oh, the star's here then. See you guys. Off we go. This was the beginning of many, many, many ongoing litigations between the WWF and WCW, because Scott Hall coming out and saying, you know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here, was grounds, apparently, for the abuse of their copyright and their intellectual characters, their intellectual property, etc.
What I find interesting about this is that it comes the night after the curtain call.
Yeah.
Which I know the curtain call is like, it's been blown hugely out of proportion.
And so few fans
for
would
the
have
wrong
known
reasons.
about it then.
That's
even,
it.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah. But it is like, I do think it's worth noting that the night before he had wrestled in front of a huge stadium of people.
Yeah, MSG.
Yeah. And then the next night he's on a different company. Like that's unusual, to say the least, even without the curtain call being this huge, topic of conversation that people like to make it out as now.
And that's a big part of what WCW was trying to do for years at that point. Like the first Nitro debuted with Lex Luger, who had been wrestled the night previously in WWF. He shows up. You have in the NWO annals of history, you've got Rick Rude showing up on Nitro while he's on the same episode of Raw that was taped a couple of days prior.
Wow.
So that was part of that kind of realism, and that was kind of baked in already. So I think having these new characters just kind of added into that. Now, we have looked at a lot of the, frankly, very interesting litigation between WWF and WCW about, and they've even sent legal letters before this. As soon as they knew that Hall's contract was expiring, they were like sending them letters saying, now, don't you call him Razor Ramon.
Yeah.
Don't you call this lad Diesel. Don't you use our stuff. And the very early iteration of Hall and Nash coming in as these, as the outsiders as they were called, there was some blanks that were left there. But I don't know if I could tell you if I'm satisfied with the legal defense that, no, we never intended them to be interpreted as being those characters, versus you were deliberately telling the audience that Vince McMahon had sent these two guys to kill our company.
Yeah, it's somewhere in between, isn't it, really, I think.
That's the beauty of making it up as you go along, It's a great legal defense. Your Honor, I was simply too incompetent to have thought that out in advance.
I think Bischoff wanted the audience to be confused.
Yes,
I think
definitely.
That's as far as he knew he wanted anything to go.
Now, that couldn't happen in this day and age.
No.
If someone showed up and said, you don't know who I am, you would immediately have 100 million tweets. I mean, look, I know who he is. I've undressed him using AI. That's exactly, look who he is. Look at his penis.
In the case of WWE, it would be like, you know who I am because here's my copyrighted brand name that has been leaked 6 months earlier on Ringside News.
And Corey, if you look there, he's wearing the new special patch on his tights that shows that he's an outsider. Collect them now. You can. And this outsider moment is brought to you by Fireball Whiskey. Drink often. Now, Eric Bischoff, of course, has the benefit of having told the same 5 anecdotes for the last 30 years of his life. But this is very much meant to play off of, as you were saying, that kind of the vacuum of what's not being said, etc. And there was those billionaire TED skits that they were playing on WWF television at the time, which were kind of making out that WWF was firing pot shots across the way and stuff like that. So I think it was reasonable for a lot of fans to assume, these guys aren't part of the show. Now, I don't know if you could go back in time, if you were watching wrestling every week and you're the mid to late 90s, so you know that wrestling's not real or whatever. If you are watching that show thinking that guy has broken into the building and gotten a live microphone and I don't know if it's quite that.
No.
Oh, it's not meant to happen. I don't know if it's quite that.
Yeah.
that's easy to kind of embellish as the years have went by, I
I
think.
imagine for some fans, there's so many people who watch wrestling. For some fans, it probably was a case of that. And for other people who were a bit more smarter marks, they were like, no, it's obviously a new signing.
And I think as well, like, I don't want people to think if we're trying to kind of say, oh no, maybe that wasn't quite as it's been portrayed or whatever. That doesn't make it any less compelling.
Oh yeah, no,
You know,
for sure.
You don't, like, and I think there's Eric Bischoff particularly has this feeling that if a wrestling fan has been tricked into believing something is real that's not, that is the highest, purest form of entertainment.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, it's like, I don't know, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall powerbombing Eric Bischoff through the stage and beating up their boss, and then showing up with baseball bats in the main event, and cops are like taking their guns out of their holsters. I don't think the North Carolina cops were going to shoot and kill those two men, but it was still really like
Yeah.
fun and exciting. Like, you could still be fun and exciting.
I mean, having watched back these segments, I didn't get the impression that they were being made out to be from the WWF so much as it was made to be out that they were independent contractors.
Yes, they were out to do their own thing.
Yeah, they were freelance wrestlers or whatever, and
They were
independent
basically-
from any company.
They were basically like legally told to, like, I think it was like very like third or fourth appearance, Eric Bischoff asked them, like, are you part of the WWF?
No.
Are you Razor Ramon?
No.
Will you stop doing the Cuban accent? Yes. But this is like so exciting, these early days to watch. The heat from this audience. Oh my, like, one of the reasons why we watched the Uncensored 96 is because I wanted Joe to see how ice cold
Yeah.
the promotion was. Not even Loch Ness versus the Giant could get these people on their feet. And just everything they do in these early days, it's electric.
Yeah.
But they're alluding to very early doors that there's going to be a third man who's going to join them. The Outsiders are going to take on a team of WCW stalwarts. And the third man, the question hangs over who it is for the fans, but also for the people who are writing the show, because they're not entirely sure who that third man is going to be.
Yeah. So originally the third man was going to be Sting.
Yes. And I think that was a fair choice.
Would have been interesting to see this era of Sting as the third man. Because I agree that like slightly later Sting could have worked really well when he's got the longer hair and he's more crow-like.
Yeah.
But he's still like, gee whiz.
Yo!
Willikers, mamacita.
I think him slotting into that group, but he would have to have had a change. He'd have to have turned into this other type of Sting that was kind of more like a Hollywood Sting, I guess, or whatever.
Yes.
Now, forgive us, folks, but trying to disseminate the lies of one Hulk Hogan, and
my
he's
God.
no longer here to defend himself or to clarify with further lies what he meant. But whether or not he was approached or he decided to come over and suggest himself, there's a lot of mystery in the air as to when Hollywood Hogan came to be.
I believe he was initially approached before Sting, and he turned it down because he was like, "Brother, I like money." Sorry, I sound a bit like Macho Man
Do
there.
that, brother. Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, but I think he was a bit scared of the unknown a little bit, and his changing of the red and yellow to the black and white didn't work with the Dungeon of Doom.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the narratives that has been told in countless WWE documentaries, etc., is that, like, oh, Hulk did the Make-A-Wish stuff, red and yellow was so iconic, if he did anything other than be the red and yellow, it would break every fan's heart and all that. And, like, folks, we got some Halloween Havocs to show
he did
you.
it.
He was dark-sided Hogan. He did shave off the beard and mustache.
But I
He
think
wore all black.
it's
He was hanging with the
important.
Hulkazoids.
Yeah, it was important to like. I think when documentaries don't mention that, it does him a disservice, and it raises an important part of why he turned down, I think, the offer initially.
Because he tried it
He
before
tried
and it
didn't
didn't work. Yeah,
it was
easy.
shit.
That was it. It's like people didn't like it and it looked kind of
Yeah.
weird, and it lives forever in community creations now as a
and
result
now we
of
pretend
that.
it never happened.
Yeah, whereas I think you're right, which is they come to him and it's like, do you want to do this? He says no. And then as the momentum builds, wouldn't be the first time that Hulk Hogan was like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't think that Sting can cut the mustard, brother.
I think I should do it.
Maybe me.
Maybe Hogan.
I love Sting. I adore him.
Yeah,
He's
Sting's
probably
great.
one of my all-time favorite wrestlers, and I credit this very podcast for me. I adore Sting, and one of the things I was most excited about doing the NWO episode was that we're going to get to see a load more Sting again,
Yeah.
and see back some of those segments. But there's no question in my mind that it had to be Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
You know, if there ever was a perfect identity of this is what wrestling was, this is what it is now. This guy coming out at Bash at the Beach, turning on WCW, and then proceeding to tell all the fans that he just wanted their money, not just that, like, he's the guy where it's like, I want power and money, and I'm the coolest. It's his fragility of ego. The fact that one of the main reasons Hulk Hogan turns into Hollywood is all these kids used to cheer me. Then they grew up, and all of a sudden, brother, their kids aren't. You're meant to pay it forward. He's so pissed that they don't just love him endlessly. It's like Homelander or something like that. It's like, I don't understand, like, why your love for me would stop in any way. I'm still me. I'm still great.
Yeah.
And for all the talk that I heard over the years that NWO buried everyone and Hogan buried everyone and he only became Hollywood Hogan so he could be on top forever and ever and ever, there's truth to a lot of that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we've ever seen a more cartoon, panto, slip on his butt and banana peel, silly Billy villain quite like Hollywood Hogan. This guy is fucking insanely entertaining because of how, like, absurdly pathetic he seems.
Yeah.
All the time.
I mean, you say about slipping on a banana peel, they are throwing trash in the ring immediately. As soon as he turns heel, there's trash everywhere.
That feels like there was this pent-up feeling. There's a catharsis when they start throwing shit, you know?
Yeah, that's it. I do wonder, because I know that WCW, one of Eric Bischoff's many plans with the trash was that he had plants.
Yeah, they did plant audience members to do it, yeah.
They would plant audience members to throw trash into the ring. They would also remove trash cans as well, so people had more trash than usual.
That is wild, because, I'd heard, I think I mentioned it even previously, Kevin Sullivan, who was one of the head bookers at the time, and he would have been involved in, like, some of the picking the buildings and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
They would go near places that had frat houses.
Yeah.
They would go to university towns. They would do, like, buy a ticket to Nitro, you get a free beer. Or
God.
if a fraternity is coming, you could do like 20 tickets and you get like 20% off. They were encouraging this. Now, there is no better time than here, I guess, to talk about that phenomenon of the trash in the ring.
It's immediate. It's literally the moment Hogan turns heel, you've got trash everywhere.
And you got around 2 years then of non-stop garbage.
It gets extreme.
There are full cups of beer, people throwing hot dogs, fries,
Bischoff
big
said
bags of popcorn.
The worst he got hit with, because you see some bad ones in the clips available online. Like, I know Nash gets hit with like a bottle at one point.
You got beamed in the face. Like, there's a few guys who get like Nash
really
is an easy target because he's so big. Yeah.
But Bischoff said the worst he got hit with was a cup full of used chewing tobacco, and it got like stuck in his hair.
Just shoot me.
Just
take the gun out and kill me
yeah.
instead. Honestly, yeah, I'd much rather that. Hogan got hit with a rock, I think. Yeah, at one point. So I think. But like, you encourage this.
Reminds me of those T-shirts from the 90s, like Hulk Hogan's a racist, throw rocks at him.
And what we did was we made sure that there was no flooring. We said just put out gravel, rocks.
Where did they even get
dirt,
it from?
I think it was at Road Wild. I believe it was. It was one of the outside, the Sturgis
Sorry, I
ones.
recognise it as Hog Wild.
Yeah, I don't know why everyone, including again in WWE documentaries through the years, would keep referring to Road Wild as Hog Wild. Hog Wild is a very funny sounding name. That is not what the pay-per-view is called.
Aww.
Even though there's a load of fat hogs there. But it's funny, with the trash being thrown in the ring, it creates this atmosphere that's almost like ECW, like the fans are on and I swear, folks, you got to watch some of these earlier, like the 96 stuff in particular. The fans they're not just standing. They're jumping around. They're clamoring over each other.
But it's great because you've still got, unlike ECW, where the audience is just like men of a certain age.
Yeah, and we're a character in this show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got like a mix of like 10-year-old children and like 90-year-old women.
Yeah.
Like you've just got like every demographic there possible.
It's still the family show, except they're all furious
they're
now.
Furious.
And you would have constant situations with the NWO in those early days where they were beating down the wrestlers, they were running riot. One of the early examples of kind of the type of like different television that you were getting, and this was a lot of this comes down to like the television producers who were working for WCW from Turner at the time, you know, and they had like these ideas that they were pitching to the wrestlers, because you know the wrestlers not gonna be like, hey, shoot it like this. Maybe they might be now or whatever, but this was, you know, bigger ideas. Like, we're going to do a big beatdown, but we're going to do it like in one single shot. Hill Street Blues, which was kind of like a police drama at the time, was cited as a big source of this, where you would like have a match taking place, you'd have Jimmy Hart come out and be like, something's happening in the back, daddy, and you'd follow Jimmy Hart all the way through.
Wow.
You'd see the Horsemen in the corner of the corridor, then you come to the back, you see Hall and Nash are beating people up, you know, throwing Rey Mysterio through a trailer, Macho Man jumping on a limousine. This is all, and you're looking around, there's just chaos everywhere, you know, people calling the police, people calling the fire brigade, you know, and that is that type of buzz, that type of electricity that felt like so unreal at the time.
Yeah.
Least of all in a company that literally 3 months prior was sending audiences to sleep with free tickets and a tired old stale Hulk Hogan act that they were over.
There's a lot of influences, it seems, from pop culture on, like, not just like the NWO in general, but like specific moments. Like that thing you were saying about Hill Street Blues. I know that Kevin Nash has said that that Attack at Disney that they did, where the cops were called for real, that was like planned to be very inspired by Alfred Hitchcock.
Oh, really?
When they get their baseball bats out,
Yeah.
and they attack, I think it's Randy Savage, but you don't actually see them make contact initially. It just cuts away before they actually come to violence. And that's, again, it's like very, very Hitchcock. The idea of like your brain is more powerful than like what your eyes can see.
I love this creativity that can only come when a company is struggling, like, you know, because they're like, we have to try new stuff. So if we try new stuff and it works, we're going to do more of that new stuff.
And it's very Mission Impossible as well. Like,
because all these wrestlers are doing their own stunts.
A lot of stunts, yeah.
Randy Savage jumping on top of cars and, you know, stuff like that is pretty damn wild, yeah.
Like the Mission Impossible, I think the first Mission Impossible movie premiered in theaters 2 months before the Disney attack.
Wow, interesting.
So it's like very much like
that's way too close to being on the pulse. I did a 2009 pay-per-view recently, and Jerry Lawler was making reference to a silent movie on commentary. Like, real finger on the pulse there. Yeah, remember 90 years ago, that great piece of business? But for the NWO and all of its creativity that we're seeing in these early moments, particularly with how the show was being presented was changing, you know, how you had these outside influences appearing. You had Hulk Hogan doing these very kind of off-the-wall promos that were referencing elements of wrestling that fans knew about, but they never really said out loud. The idea that it was even called the NWO, that was just kind of something like, you know, Bischoff said backstage to Hogan, you're going to call it the New World, this is the New World Order of Wrestling. Wasn't decided, like, that's what the group's going to be. It was just kind of, that was a phrase that you were going to use. The first instance, Hogan called it the New World Organization.
Oh.
And this is a wild thing, right? For all the chat we've had about, you know, the legal letters and Jerry McDevitt knocking on Turner's door every 2 minutes about don't use this, don't use that. One of the main things that they were accusing them of trying to like take their property or use something like it was the fact that WCW, before naming him as Scott Hall or Kevin Nash on television, were looking up copyrights on things like, could we call him the bad guy? Could we call him Axel or Axel or Axel with 3 X's and 2 C's to try and be kind of similar to Diesel or to Razor Ramon? But here's the wild thing, folks. The NWO, they didn't even look up and search to see if they could use it.
That's so funny.
Until 2 months after Bash at the Beach.
Oh my god.
So Hogan is there and they have NWO, they're spray painting everywhere. They don't even own the copyright. They haven't even checked to see if they could own the copyright.
So dumb.
But like, it's so off the seat of their pants.
Yeah.
So much of the stuff that's like so iconic about the NWO was just kind of done on the fly.
Yeah.
Like the logo, for instance, we were blown away to find out about this logo.
Yeah, the logo was sent off to Disney's MGM department.
They weren't even sent off. They literally found her backstage.
Yeah, it was
during a show.
A woman called Jenny Sloan. She worked for Disney MGM for their graphic design department. She had 30 minutes or something crazy like that.
They're like, oh, we need a logo. Can you do it real quick?
She had to send up 3 of them, and she was like, and then they got to pick which one they liked. But I feel so bad for this. Not just her, but there's other people as well who've been involved in the backstage part of things who haven't really been fairly compensated.
Well, she
or
didn't get
credited.
any royalties for one of the top-selling wrestling t-shirts of all time. Yeah. Now there's a load of random myths about the NWO shirt out there, they sold more shirts than they did tickets. That is just clearly not true. We have looked up these
They were
numbers.
very careful actually with that, because there was I know in Japan, when it was very popular design, they had to move the merchandise booths inside the building past the ticket office.
Yes.
You had to buy a ticket to get the t-shirt, so they wouldn't have been able to buy that many more t-shirts than tickets.
But it's wild though, because it is one of the most iconic things ever. This is more so than any other piece of wrestling merchandise or any other wrestling iconography, whatever you want to call it. Nothing has permeated pop culture worldwide like that NWO logo.
Even Austin 316 has
way more so. Way more so.
Like that.
In wrestling, Austin 316, you can make the argument. Rap artists, celebrities, influencers, this is something that it has not went away. I remember Kylie Jenner wore a Wolfpack shirt. There's instances upon instances of, and this will be the case where it's not like you're WWE now, where it's hey, I'm a rapper and I loved wrestling and I watched wrestling every single day and I've got my own special championship and they're going to put me in the main event of WrestleMania because they like me and I make a lot of money for them. This is people who are I don't even know anything about wrestling.
Yeah.
That's just a cool shirt though. But that story you're saying there about the stuff in Japan, that actually came from Sonny Ono, who was Eric's friend and the kind of the New Japan link, so to speak. And they would have these people because it was so huge in streetwear at the time. People love the shirts so much. They're yeah, okay, you're coming in, you're buying 20 shirts, buy a ticket instead. They would buy a ticket and then go in and still, they would happily pay the extra $50, $60 to go in and get the shirt still. It didn't stop them.
Well, and then they'd just piss off again.
Yeah, they wouldn't
even stay
they wouldn't
to watch
stay
the
around to
wrestling.
say
That's
Muta
so
and Shono.
funny.
Madness.
That's really funny.
And that all came because they were filming the early NWO segments at the Disney Studios and they were they need a logo. Can you do it? And there was a story about that lady in the NWO book where years and years, 20 years later, she was queuing up for groceries somewhere and she saw someone wearing an NWO shirt and she was like, the fuck? I did that was me. And she had no idea. She had no idea that it had become this huge, larger than life, kind of a life of its own. That logo, a life of its own, to put it very mildly. I think one of the ways that the NWO spread through pop culture was because it had a very cool logo.
It is a very cool logo. I've got an NWO t-shirt that you bought me.
Yes.
And I love it.
You do, yeah. And true to form, Joe got that shirt before she knew anything about the NWO.
That's true, yeah. Much like Kylie Jenner.
Now you wear it, it'll be kind of slight mixed feelings, maybe.
Yeah.
Who knows? It's more complex.
A cool thing that they did with the merchandise, other than putting it behind the ticket booth, which is obviously smart, but I love the fact that they have this really interesting method with the early NWO stuff to make it seem not part of WCW, where they would send
it's
out
a separate organization.
Where they would have bootleggers who are actually employed by WCW to go out a block away from where the building would be to have the show.
Yeah, in the car park or something like that.
And then have all the NWO t-shirts sold by official bootleggers.
Yeah, they had an NWO street team.
Yeah.
So they would come into the show or even during the show sometimes, and they would use this kind of to try and build buzz. And they'd throw you'd be in the middle of a match and you look at it and go, what's going on over there? And there'd be people throwing flyers in the air. And it's oh, these randos have come in, they're disrupting the show. And it's they're WCW employees. They're wearing NWO shirts. And they'd have flyers saying tradition bites, WCW sucks. And that was one of the huge thing about the NWO's success early doors. You talk about Hogan saying the things that were kind of unsaid. They said WCW sucks and it was boring and it was crap. It deserved to die. They said all the things that people critique the company about in bad faith. They said that out loud. They made it a core part of the show. The NWO weren't just like, we're going to beat you in wrestling matches. They were like, this company is so shit. It's so boring. And you're there buying a ticket to the show and tuning in going, yeah, this place sucks.
It's just the idea that for the first 6 months to a year, if you wanted an NWO t-shirt,
you had to go down the road.
You couldn't buy one from the show. You had
So
to buy
cool.
it from a bootlegger who'd have it on the floor. And then even then, once they introduced it to part of like the main, canon of
Yeah.
WCW, they had a separate catalog for all the NWO merchandise.
So fucking...
To the WCW merchandise, and they had a separate phone number even.
And you'd have obviously the guy at the end who'd be like, this is the NWO t-shirt hotline.
WCW smells.
Postage and payment is not included in your order. More things about the NWO that are considered essential, iconic. For me, like when I watched the NWO for the first time when they came into WWE in 2002, and the thing that got me was that, whoa, when they come out, it goes black and white.
Yeah.
And it's all like the monochrome. I thought, because, wrestling is so colorful and bombastic. This kind of monochrome version of things, that for me was like really eye-catching. And I'll tell you, folks, when we were sitting down, we were watching all these dozens of hours of WCW TV shows, and you're doing it with someone who is heavily pregnant, and goddamn, I respect the fuck out of you, Booker woman, for going through all this while you're pregnant. But you could be awoken from a trimester 3 nap by the phrase, "The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order." Oh my God, those segments.
Highlights.
So
So good.
these would be peppered throughout the WCW programming, Nitro, Saturday Night, etc.
Even the first ones where they haven't got the logo, they've barely even got the color palette down. They're so good.
So how would you describe them? What makes them? Because they are still to this day, they're very different to anything you see in wrestling, and you couldn't do anything like this now because it would be viewed as being too derivative of the NWO, I guess.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They're always in black and white, like as in filmed literally in that old black and white movie style. And they are always really fast clipped and edited.
Yeah, snappy.
It's really snappy. And we found out that they were inspired by the 1990s Paul Mitchell hair product range.
Now, we couldn't believe this, right? So we're like, no way. Because we'd read this, we'd heard this, and we're like, nah, not at all. Then we went onto YouTube and found one of those 1990s adverts accounts, popped on one of them, and we're like, wow, those are quick cuts. Then we found another one that was in black and white, and we're like, okay, this is a lot more. Then Jo had the idea, she was like, rewind, Kevin, and then she played the NWO music, and like black and white lady turned into you holding a bottle of conditioner. They're taking over, okay? That's what's going on there.
It's so good. I'll add it to the recommended bonus viewing.
Yes,
So you can see.
howtowrestling.com, check that out.
Yep. This is so funny. But yeah, they're really, really stylistic. Really, right from the get-go.
Necessity is the mother of invention. The reason this happened was because these three guys, who've kind of been put together fairly quickly, and, Hall and Nash were like, our big debut has now been kind of maybe overshadowed. Hulk Hogan is the dreaded politician we were all warned about throughout our careers. Hulk Hogan's like, these two young guys are trying to steal my juice, brother. I'm not sure what's going to go on here. No one trusted anyone really, and no one really knew what this group was going to be. The outsiders just felt now that their thing had been turned from a duo into a trio. And the original promos that they did, they gave the mic to, they put the camera on Hogan. They're like, all right, you got to wrestle the Giant for the title at the next pay-per-view. Off you go. And Hogan did his usual, well, you know something, brother, that nasty wart-infested Giant, I've been hanging and banging with the Scott Hall and the Kevin Nash dude, and when the other and he just did the usual thing. And you can even see, if you look very closely in the cut-up promos that came afterwards, Hall and Nash are like, we've traveled back in time. And everyone agreed, other than Hogan, who wasn't told, that like, this was a disaster. We did this shoot, we wanted something new and fresh, and Hogan's just doing a 10-year-old promo warmed over in the microwave.
Yeah.
So they cut it up like that to make it less obvious that Hogan was just doing his normal thing. So then you would have like Scott Hall be like, learn to love it. And then you cut to Hogan be like, and a million people will be watching Hollywood. Cut to Nash be like, we're so fucking cool. Cut back to Hogan, and then I'm going to win the title, dude.
It's
and
very surreal.
It's so surreal because it's all over the place.
Yeah.
Like, it's like a podcast where one person has a wildly different energy from other people. Like, it'd be like if I did coke before an episode of the Attitude Era podcast, basically. And yeah, a lot of that needs to be put at the feet of the man whose voice was then used for a lot of the NWO announcements, in the theme music, the voiceover as well. That was the WCW producer.
Neil Pruitt.
Yeah, huge part of it.
Massive.
He was the guy who decided to, like, we'd use handheld cameras. You know, he was the guy who, along with a few of the other producers, picked the music.
Yeah. FCD 115 track 14. Check it out.
Yeah, baby. Pop that to Spotify. It was shocking, I guess, to a degree. Because, I mean, I knew that Turner had a big music catalogue and whatnot.
Makes sense.
You fucking love this theme, right?
Of course I do. We've listened to about 100 hours of this theme in the past 2 months.
It's funny because back in like 2008 or 9, me and my friend who I went to WrestleMania with, we were like, we're going to watch every single episode of Nitro with the NWO. We got like 4 episodes in. We're like, this music is just playing all the time. We're not going to do this anymore. Because it felt like the music was on a constant loop. Like,
didn't watch enough of it for it to really give you Stockholm syndrome.
That's it. It does. It comes through the other side. Like,
you come through the other side and you're like, this is the greatest music ever written.
Well, basically, it's like a fever dream of being in my dad's car growing up.
Really?
Because there's a million different Jimi Hendrix riffs and tracks that have just been kind of like, I'll have that bit, I'll have that bit, and I'll have that bit.
Yeah, it's
and we'll stick them all together.
An amalgamation of 5 Jimi Hendrix records: Highway Chile, Purple Haze, Hey Joe, Stone Free, and The Stars That Play with Laughing Sam's Dice.
Yeah, that last one is, I think, where the main chunk from it is.
That bit.
But yeah, this is not like something like people often say, oh, Jimmy Hart would just listen to someone else's music and then change a few tracks or change a few notes here or there.
Yeah.
This is literally, they all sat down in the Turner Music Library, which has like 1,000 songs. They went through one by one and they're like, this one works. And then they added in some voiceovers, you know, and that was it. That was the legendary track. That's kind of why it's so inconsistently featured over the years. There were some video games where it wasn't there.
Right.
You know, it's not on Spotify, for instance, because it's not an original track. It's just part of a library. Apparently, it's one of those tracks that'll show up in pornography from the late 90s if you watch enough of it as well. Yeah.
New world order.
For life. The biggest icon in sports entertainment.
Oh my god.
I feel like such a fucking pig. For life. So another part of the NWO catalogue of important bits that they always did was spray painting. And it's something that I always kind of took for granted. Like, hey, they use the spray paint or whatever it is. Not everyone liked the spray paint, mind. I think Ric Flair getting sprayed in the eyes with legitimate spray paint.
That's so fucked. I can't believe they did that.
Absolutely horrible. Or like when they sprayed in Macho Man's bald spot, which is, again, just spray me in the eyes, man. That's so much less embarrassing. But the spray painting, when we were watching it, it was like, you know what? I don't think of a more stressful thing to have to do under pressure.
It's interesting to see who can do it and who can't.
There are some perfectionists in the group, let's just say. But it doesn't really, like, you see, they're spraying the production truck. Like, a lot of the places they spray paint, like sweaty humans covered in baby oil or plasticky production trucks, they're not meant to take spray paint. So they end up having to kind of go over it very, very quickly. Camera cut away, or like someone spray paints something and you look to the left, it's like it's gone. Like you know, it's like you've written on like a non-permanent marker on a surface or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So it can be fairly stressful. But you know, drawing people's outlines like they've been murdered and stuff like that. Hogan, I think, ended up becoming one of, if not the most perfectionist when it came to spray painting things. But then again, he had to spray paint the championship.
Yeah, and he kind of fucked that up.
I mean, the first NWO spray painting of the championship.
It's pretty shit.
It's fairly like. Yeah. He did it a second time later on with the red, and it looked a little more.
It looks a lot better.
I think they got different paint by then.
Maybe, yeah.
When Macho Man joined, more on that in a little bit. There's a man where it's like, if he spray paints, he is going to do it exactly correctly.
The first time he did it, he kind of messed it up. And then the second time he did it, it's like the best spray paint job you've ever seen.
It's incredible. I'm a playing concrete genie. Oh, yeah.
I took a course in graffiti.
The other thing about them is that they had a litany of catchphrases, you know, from Too Sweet to For Life. And I think, as you alluded to earlier, Joe, a lot of this is just from the fact that Hall and Nash were consumers of mid to late 90s pop culture and would happily just throw it onto a wrestling show where most people would not know its origins.
Yeah, apparently For Life was from a rap artist called Mac 10.
Yeah, Death Row Records, which is like the biggest rap organization of that time. Kind of cool, cutting edge, you know, a little bit of, you know, very much like kind of what the NWO was trying to get some of that kind of vibe from or whatever
well,
it was.
Apparently Mac 10 robbed a burger joint and said he wanted to do it for life.
I mean, when you rob a burger joint, you don't just do it for Christmas. It is for life.
There's something so funny to me about robbing a burger joint. I assume for money, but I like to imagine for burgers.
Hang on a second, brother. How many burgers did you get? Because I'm entitled to 25% of those, as per the agreement, okay? It is funny to see Hogan at the start being this, like, artifact from another era who is kind of playing the silly version of himself, who's kind of, like, out of touch and all that. But then as the years go on and Hogan's, like, wearing the bandana and the wide cut streetwear jeans and stuff like that, I think a little bit of that where it was... He saw that he was uncool, saw that Hall and Nash knew what was cool, and then he kind of tried to absorb as much of it as possible.
Yeah.
And there's so much psychodrama and people trying to feed off of one another and thinking the other person is fucking them over, or they might as well fuck them over first. Like, the extent of idea theft within the group under the auspices of, it's all in the NWO, so it's fine. Which, very funny, would be used in kayfabe very often when the group would fuck each other over. Hey, it's all in the family. Hollywood Hogan, for instance, just randomly out of the blue started writing Wolfpack on his boots.
Oh, God.
Hollywood's Wolfpack. Now, the Wolfpack was like, that was a Hall and Nash, like, that was their subgroup, their thing. It was actually Sean Waltman, 6. He was the one who came up with it. You know, I just think it's very funny that, you know, it was...
I'll have that, brother.
I'll have that, you know. And then it kind of, when it was very obvious that he couldn't get away with it, he wouldn't have that. But yeah, a lot of it is just kind of rap culture being taken... And I'm sure there's some people who, maybe if we're looking at it through a certain lens, would probably be a bit, like, upset that it was just a group of exclusively white people who were just...
Yeah, I'll be having that. Thank you.
Seeing them all with their backwards bandanas and gang signs and all that.
But we've got so many black members in the NWO.
There is, like, a weird moment when Rodman joins later on, and Kevin Nash is like, "Hey Rodman, what are you doing up with all them white boys?" I'm like, you're
come
white.
off it.
Come on, man, I'm black, but come on, you know. Hey, wait, he did say that in TNA, remember?
Oh my God, he did.
He said he legitimately believes that. Does he believe he's transracial? Is that the term for it?
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's canon.
Maybe we have to get more on. We have to write into Kevin Nash's podcast to find out a little bit more about that. So this trio was a trio for all of, I believe, 2-3 months, maybe. And then randomly on an episode of Nitro, we cut to the audience where a newly signed Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man in WWF, who Bischoff had signed with the idea of being a commentator because he had such a great voice. He held up a 4, like the 4 Horsemen sign, and then he mouthed. How ironic. He's not in the 4 Horsemen. And he held up a 5 and mouthed the words, "next week."
Right.
So he was announcing himself as the 4th member of the New World Order. And the next week, the 5th member debuted, and it was a very early Hogan pick. His protege and guy he liked to work with a lot, the Giant. Now, in terms of adding members to the group here, and what we had kind of in the very early doors, this kind of cutting-edge, anti-authority group, do they fit the mold? How do you think about them? Because we have a lot of members of the NWO to talk about here tonight.
I think the Giant fits, but DiBiase doesn't.
DiBiase is a weird one. Because we do have a lot of announcements from the NWO afterwards where Hogan is like, "This man's the boss. He's the guy in charge. He's pulling the strings." And DiBiase's like, "That's right. I lead the NWO." Yeah. But then they kind of walk that back a little bit, I think. The idea of him is that he's meant to be kind of a manager for them. And in kayfabe... He doesn't
do fucking anything. He just stands there.
Around a lot, looking cool. Wearing sunglasses that don't fit him very well. Yeah. He's used as an NWO commentator on occasion.
Oh, right.
And I think the kayfabe thing that I liked was, how did this group get television time? How did they able, to afford their lawyers to protect them and all that? And the idea was that Ted DiBiase in kayfabe has an infinite source of money by defrauding the people of Missouri. So he's able to fund this group, and that is the kind of the kayfabe explanation. The Giant being there is slightly more strange.
I like the Giant being there, and it makes sense to me.
I like the Giant, Joe.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about Big Show right now.
You like him because he's pretty.
I like them that he's pretty, but there's something about the Giant that is kind of compelling at this point in time.
Yeah.
Because he's so new, he's so fresh, he's so, like, moldable.
Yeah.
You can see these influences from all these extremely strong personalities, for good and for bad, on him quite quickly.
And at this point, he's the best wrestler in the NWO. Well, okay, that's not fair.
No,
Hall,
come on,
Hall
come on,
exists.
Scott Hall, baby,
Scott
come
Hall
on.
exists. He's the second best member of the NWO.
And I think it was very much like Hogan is like, I want my guy in the group. I think it was more of a flex
Yeah.
on his end than anything else. And if Hogan gets one of his friends, then Hall and Nash get one of their friends.
Right. It's like a balancing act.
So we get our next member, the sixth member, which is Six.
Right.
And I don't think there is a more overlooked and, in my mind, instrumental part of the group than Sean Waltman.
He's both overlooked and underlooked because, like, in the A&E documentary, they completely ignore the fact that there's any other members of the NWO other than Six and Hall and Nash and
Yes.
Hogan.
The new version of the NWO that exists in the WWE Extended Universe canon,
Yeah.
the one that would be included on a WWE wrestling game or on your trading cards, is the NWO is Hogan, Hall, Nash, Six, and Eric Bischoff.
Yeah.
And Six and Eric Bischoff are photoshopped in with varying degrees of quality.
Different age from the rest of them as well, like
So,
from
yeah.
a different time period.
When they inducted the NWO into the Hall of Fame during the pandemic, Six was part
Yeah.
of the group or whatever
But
it is.
no Giant.
No, Giant, and Giant is like, fairly big part of it, you know?
Yeah.
It's weird to pick one and not the other, I guess.
That's it.
But I think what Six brought was more of that cool factor.
Yeah, he brought the legitimacy, I think,
Yeah.
to them.
And also, at that point we know how to decide who's the best wrestler in the group.
Oh, yeah,
because
no, it's immediately him.
He's an excellent wrestler. He had a very, very unique style with lots of spin kicks and kind of martial arts brought in, very fast paced, and he could lose as well. Now, one of the issues that he had in the group was the pay scale on the NWO at this point was kind of bananas. Hogan was one of the top paid people in all of wrestling at that point, but it wasn't just Hogan's base salary. He had lots of sweeteners.
Yeah.
Hogan appears on Nitro, he gets a cut of the ticket sales. If Hogan appears on a pay-per-view, he gets a cut of the buy rate. He gets a minimum appearance fee for every show he appears at. Hogan gets $25,000 a month just for being in the NWO.
That's
as
insane.
a promotional fee that he's promoting the group by his
Easiest
acknowledgement of
fucking
its
money.
existence.
Easiest money you could possibly make.
And
on
he's
this
the only
earth.
one who gets any money from the merchandise.
That's wild.
I think Hall and Nash get a cut as well, but Hogan was getting the lion's share of the
Yeah.
NWO merch. And he's making probably $5 million all in.
Yeah.
Waltman's making $200,000.
Yeah.
And I know it's kind of weird to be like, well, you only made $200,000. That's a lot of money,
A
brother.
huge amount of money.
But even still,
yeah.
kind of crazy. But he did things as well that added more to that kind of cutting edge nature of the group. He would walk around with the video camera all the time, and he'd kind of video all of their kind of their misdeeds and whatnot. Particularly there was one we saw which was a little bit too real, which was Hall and Nash running the Steiner brothers off the road in their car.
Yeah.
And WCW with Turner had a pretty impressive stunt team. And they did a pretty good job of making you think that Scott Hall and Kevin Nash basically committed vehicular manslaughter. Because the car flips over and all that,
Yeah.
it was really wild. And one of the many occasions where they did something and then immediately had to stop acknowledging it because it was being a bit too cutting edge, or a bit too real, I should say.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the cool things as well about the NWO is that even though we're extending our ranks, the idea that you would automatically be a member, which kind of became a bit of a joke in its later run, that was not it at all. We've talked about people's friends coming in, but
Yeah.
they made a real big point in the early days to be like, oh, here comes the booty man, Ed Leslie, Hogan's the bag man, here comes the bag man. And Hogan's like, I appreciate the bag, but you're not for life, brother. They beat the shit out of Hogan's best friend. Or the Nasty Boys, couple of middle of the card heels, also friends with Hogan. No, they get tricked, that you think you're joining, you don't get to join. The idea that the club was kind of exclusive helped that notoriety in the early days. And you would have fans who would now start coming to shows being like, I'm an NWO fan, I hate WCW, WCW sucks, I've come here to watch the downfall of this organization.
Yeah.
And, you see a lot of that. Like, I've heard stories, we had messages from people being like, oh, if you wore an NWO shirt in my school, you got detention.
Whoa, really?
It was viewed as being like a naughty thing. It was bad.
What? That's so wild.
This is a horseman school, goddammit. You don't wear that shit here. You take it off. Parent-teacher evening, I never lost more respect for your son when he showed up wearing those NWO colors. I think you failed him as a parent. But that's besides the point.
There was one instance. Meltzer apparently reported that around this time, a woman called the WCW officers furious that her 5-year-old had spray painted NWO onto her 1-year-old.
Now, you want to talk about a small target there, folks.
I know. I wish she'd taken a picture. She was too angry, obviously, but like, can you imagine?
I'm sure Child Services somewhere down in Wyoming or wherever it is
Yeah.
got a copy of that on file somewhere, you know? But it's funny, we're talking about kind of the innovation and how we're doing things so differently, and, that the presentation is so different. One thing you won't hear us talking about a lot tonight on this episode is matches.
Oh, no.
Because I think it was Cody Rhodes recently, someone like that on one of those WWE podcasts, someone said words to the effect of, as great as WCW was, at the top of the card in the main events, the match quality was just too poor.
Yeah.
And like, you can't think of like great matches that like most of those guys had. And, it's funny thinking we're talking about it being different and shaking things up, but like the first 6 months of the NWO storyline is the vehicles for you to get Hogan versus the Giant, Hogan versus Ric Flair, Hogan versus Randy Savage, Hogan versus Roddy Piper. These are all matches that you had seen, millions of times before. The only difference is this time Hogan is in the corner cowering away and whatnot, even though he's still doing his usual stuff of raking your eyes and
The leg drop.
dropping that leg. Joe has got some strong opinions on the leg drop, folks.
I really like his leg drop. I just can't believe he was still doing it like 9 years later.
Well, it didn't do him any favors, I don't think, in the long
I'm
run.
amazed it didn't just explode out from under him at one point.
Why do you like it? Because I remember...
I just think it's cool.
I remember distinctly WrestleMania 18 is like him versus The Rock. I think it was like one of the first full Hogan matches I'd ever seen, other than a bit on Raw or
Well, it's
whatever.
no good at that point.
And I'm like,
sour.
that's it? And Jim Ross like, he beat Andre the Giant with that move. I'm like, did he?
When he's younger, and he can still pull it off, I think, up until like 1997, 1998, his leg drops are still cool.
Yeah, okay, fair. I'll give him that.
But the hip degrades.
It certainly does. The voice as well. Hogan in so many of these promos, he's like, and I like the idea that he was talking out his arse so much that he was like frequently out of breath and nearly out of diction because his voice was so absolutely knackered, We get towards the end of 1996, our newest member, another reveal, joining the NWO, Eric Bischoff.
The most important member, really.
Now, I think they make out in the A&E Doc 6 is like, he was like Emperor Palpatine. You know how he was like a member of the Senate, but he was actually in the NWO. And when you join the NWO, it's for life. Unlimited creative control, Terry. I both love and hate Eric being in the group. There's some parts that I think really work, some parts I don't think are so hot.
Oh, he takes it too far.
What do you mean too far?
It starts off, it's such a good idea.
Because it does storyline, it makes great sense.
It explains a lot in kayfabe.
And just to point out as well, to put to bed any weird feelings about, because there's constant chat like, oh, he's the boss of the NWO, he runs the NWO, he's like Vince McMahon is the evil genius ruler of WWF, and Eric Bischoff was the boss of the NWO. But he's not the boss of the NWO.
I think it's an interesting debate to be had about whether or not he is the mastermind of the NWO or if he's just a sellout.
Yeah.
I'm of the camp that I think he's just a sellout, and that his involvement explains a lot of the more recent tactics of the NWO, but like the idea that he was there from the very beginning, like controlling everything as a puppet master, no.
I think it does make kayfabe sense that he was a Turner executive who saw the tide was turning, so to speak, and that he was unable to stop what was happening, so he decided to join them. But like literally, I think the first thing Hogan says about Eric Bischoff was, he used to work for the WCW, now he works for us.
Yes.
So he was the guy able to book their matches, keep the, and they're playing off the real life stuff that the Turner executives like Dr. Harvey Schuler, they didn't know what wrestling was.
No.
The people at Turner Sports didn't really understand the nuance of wrestling. So in kayfabe, the idea that this guy was technically running with a renegade organization wouldn't have made any difference to them.
I think his biggest contribution to the NWO in kayfabe is that he can bring bodies from WCW. His involvement means that there's a lot more sway backstage in WCW with the idea of like, you're gonna, stop working for the WCW and you're gonna work for the NWO instead.
One of my favorite story beats of the whole NWO is when Eric joins, and Eric joins when like Piper kind of outs him, like the idea that Piper figured out.
Yeah,
he's such a super genius. In a moment of rare clarity and lucidity, Roddy Piper figured out that Eric Bischoff was a baddie. But he says that if you're a part of WCW, you have 30 days to convert your contracts to the NWO organization, or you're our enemy and we're going to kill you all, or whatever it is.
And that's how you get all the really great signings like Buff Bagwell.
Okay, this is where we have to maybe talk about swelling the ranks with some people who are perhaps not really fitting the group. So first of all, we got Vincent joining in, the former Virgil.
I feel bad for Vincent. I think he's been done really dirty by WWE specifically. Erased by history. The only black member other than Dennis Rodman, which I don't know if he can really count because he was a part-timer.
Yeah.
But Vincent was always there.
Yeah, he was always there. He was always getting beat up, bless him.
Yeah.
We did have, Buff Bagwell joining. And something that I do like about the NWO is there's so many moments where someone joins the group by betraying their partner. Because Buff Bagwell joins because, the tag team come out, American Males, he turns in his partner, joins the NWO. Scott Norton joins, he's part of a tag team called Fire and Ice, he betrays his partner, joins the NWO.
Yeah.
Much later on, Scott Steiner, he betrays his brother Rick and joins the NWO.
Yeah.
The idea being that like you will turn on your longtime friend or even your brother to join this group. But who in the name of sweet Jesus, Joe, thought Michael Wall Street.
Yep, he's the one.
The former IRS.
Him, please.
And as much as we love him, Big Bubba Rogers, the big boss man.
Oh, I like Boss Man's involvement.
That makes no sense.
I like it. This also leads us, though, to a theory that I had, or a realization, perhaps, which is the NWO glow down.
Okay. There's a lot of evidence for this, folks, okay? There is.
Which is that as soon as you join the NWO, you glow down significantly. We see it with the Giant. He goes from the prettiest member of WCW to, running at that wall. He looks like shit throughout his time period in the NWO. Poor guy.
Poor guy, like,
the partying took it out of him.
It's funny because with the Giant, he's the first member of the NWO who's kicked out of the group.
Yes.
And he leaves the group because he wins a battle royale that ensures him a shot against Hogan. And then Hogan tries to kind of push him to the outside, downplay him, browbeat him, and then Giant's like, no, I want my title shot. And and it's so funny, the segment where he's like demands it from Hogan, and he grabs Hogan, and Hogan's like, I'm sorry, I love you, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it, brother, I'm sorry, I didn't know it meant that much to you, I'm sorry. But like the second he leaves the NWO, he glows up immediately again. Yeah, and he's like full of piss and vinegar and fire, and looks like he's not hungover all the time.
Ray Traylor is unrecognizable in his time in the NWO.
He cut his hair the entire time,
his
Joe.
hair out, yeah.
But like these lads part of the NWO just doesn't,
No.
It just felt like at that point you were more concerned about bodies and the idea that more people are going to be here. There was always the theory that Hogan, Hall, and Nash didn't want to take any bumps, didn't want any, to wrestle any matches. So you put these lads in, you could have NWO kind of representation up and down the cards. But honestly, I think almost every episode of Nitro that we watched ended with every single member of the NWO fighting a million other guys.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, Nash took a big tumble over the top rope. Hogan would get caught out, or everyone got beat up. The NWO got beat up
a lot,
constantly, all the time. Another member of the group that joined around this time as well, the evil referee, Tricky Nick Patrick, who I think has become one of the all-time villains in Joe Graham's wrestling canon.
Yeah.
Getting to grips with Nick Patrick in his NWO tenure. What do you think of Nick?
I don't know how I feel about Nick Patrick. There's certain parts of his run with the NWO I'm quite fond of. And then there's other parts where I ironically kind of love it, but I actually hate it.
Because a lot of the start of it is we don't know is he or is he not a member of the group? Because they would do stuff like he would do calls that were maybe a little bit in the favor of the NWO, or ignore something that a babyface should have had, you know,
And then
a reprimand or whatever.
other times he comes out with sunglasses and a leather jacket and like a
Your
polo
ear
t-shirt.
guitar, like,
Yeah,
you know,
it's
I'm
like-
part of the group.
Yeah.
Talk about a glow down. This guy with 2 earrings looks like the world's worst pub landlord when he joins the NWO. A great little bit is that he gets technically fired from WCW for being such a bad official at one point, but continues to appear in NWO matches wearing a mask, like, you know, from Phone Jacker, like a big hat pulled over him, you know. But the poor lad, because he is NWO for life and the only referee who is, I did the signs, by the way, just so you know.
Yeah.
He ends up having to referee like 100 trillion million matches.
Yeah.
I think the NWO sold out pay-per-view. He had to referee the entire card all on his own, so, you know.
And he's a shit referee, let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean,
I hate his limp-wristed counts.
yeah, I think you still believe that's the reason why we had all the ads at Starrcade 1997 was that he just has a bad count to begin
Awful
with.
count.
Like, I think with the NWO at this point is that it's rapidly expanding. It's kind of exponential. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Hogan is happy doing what he's doing because the focus is still on him. He's the champion. Hall and Nash have enough creative leeway to be able to kind of, you know, put their stamp on things. I think everyone is happy enough that we are at a point in WCW where we're breaking records. The tide has turned. We are getting much better ratings. We're killing Vince McMahon's WWF Raw in the ratings. The pay-per-views, the tick. Like, you can see, if you watch through 96 and into 97, like, the buildings they're in, it's amazing. They literally just go bip, bip, bip. Like, they just get bigger, 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 bigger. More people. The people are more engaged.
Yeah.
They're throwing, like, you can actually plot the success of the NWO, WCW's money taking, by how much shit is thrown in the ring.
Yeah, you totally can.
You know, it's almost a complete parallel, so to speak. But Bischoff was very adamant at this time, and I want to know what your thoughts were on this, that the way to go was to brand NWO as a separate organization and have its own show. We'll have our own NWO pay-per-views. We'll have NWO TV shows like NWO Nitro, etc. It never really happened.
No.
I don't know if you think that's a worthwhile endeavor or not.
I think it's a nice idea. I don't know if it could have worked in actuality when they're still booking it by the seat of their pants.
Spoken like someone who's watched and reviewed Sold Out 1997, by the way. But yeah, this idea that you can be this rebel outsider group that's breaking up the normal show and trying to tear it down and all that stuff. But then also, here is our wrestling show. I don't think you can be the counterculture, you know, cool renegade group if it's like, welcome to our show and here are our matches. I tell you what, I loved with Sold Out when we watched it back in the day. I loved the presentation.
Yeah.
I loved that everyone had weird graphics. The stage looked different. Everything about it was different. They did do a NWO Nitro at one point. Like, they did a thing where, like, the NWO came over and they're like, we run the show now, and they pulled down the Nitro set and they ran off the commentators and they changed the masks and the ropes and all that. Which is like, me saying that, I'm like, that's so cool. But on a wrestling show that's like fast paced, at 15 minutes of slowly taking down a sign and then erecting the scaffolding to put up the other sign. And then once the show started, it was like, okay, yeah, we've got Eric Bischoff on commentary now. He's not great.
No.
Ted DiBiase, great voice. He's not great on commentary either. So I think it was like trying to find ways to make it more marketable. But Hogan alleges that, you know, Eric Bischoff got he had a phrase for it. What was it? The cool zone.
The cool zone. That's where I would have called my bedroom in the 90s.
It's a dad-free zone. This is the cool zone. You're not allowed.
No little brothers allowed. This is the cool zone.
But I think once Eric became part of the group, wanting it to be like as cool as it was, I think perhaps started to miss the point of what made it cool to begin with.
Yeah.
And you can't be, it's no more so than when ECW went on national television. You can't be the outside renegade force and then be like front and center with a massive spotlight on you.
Yeah.
That doesn't work for it. A member that joined that I think was the first point when we were watching through all this where it was like, okay, we got chaos, we got anarchy, we got, you know, loads of heat, but this makes no sense and you're not explaining it to me, is the Macho Man Randy Savage joining the New World Order. Because this started off kind of riveting in its own sense. Because Elizabeth is forced to join the NWO kind of against her will.
She's kidnapped and taken to Hogan's hotel room.
At the top of all these girders. And he's just throwing barrels at people. It's fucking disgusting, man.
It's because it's kind of shocking, especially when you know the real life tensions between Hulk Hogan and Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth.
And they play that up.
They really
Because
do.
Macho and Liz are divorced at this point
Yeah.
in time, you know? So yeah, how the idea that I think Hogan is saying to Liz that they're not going to target Randy if she joins the group.
Right.
And then Randy finds this out and he explodes. He's been attacked by the NWO countless times. He's been laid out.
Yeah, he's one of their main targets.
Yeah, and he's one of the many guys who, like, after they have their wicked way with him, like Ric Flair, he disappears for a while.
Yeah.
And then he comes back and he just joins the group.
That's it. Like, he abandons Miss Elizabeth to the evil Hulk Hogan, and then he just joins them. And she doesn't even, like, have this storyline of her own,
No.
where it's like, oh no, her husband is like turned against her, as it were, and has like betrayed her and abandoned her. It's just like, oh no, now she's part of it as well.
You laid out this like kind of storyline to me. I love a good fancy booking born of outrage.
Yeah.
But you were like, oh, imagine if you did a thing where like Macho Man, to try and win Liz back, joined the NWO.
Yeah.
And he's like kind of disgusted with himself that he's debased himself and joined Hogan's gang, but he gets to be close to Liz again, and there's that little twinkle of a potential of a chance of, and it's
Meanwhile, she's like, it's not worth it, Randy. Don't do it for me.
and instead he just joins the group.
Yeah.
And like
Nothing happens.
we searched high and low and watched all of the television.
Yeah.
And the closest we could find was, I believe there's an NWO videotape where Randy Savage says, as soon as I realized I wasn't fighting the NWO, I was fighting myself.
Oh.
That doesn't make any sense.
No.
Also, look at him in the NWO. If there's not a man fighting himself internally,
Yeah.
look at his eyes. His skin looks like it's eating his own flesh. He's clearly at a micro and macro level fighting himself still. But I think it was the point that they wanted more stars in the NWO.
Yeah.
They had a lot of kind of henchmen and lower
They're
down
not willing
guys.
to do the work to earn
Yeah.
those stars. They're just like, okay, now you're with us now. It's literally like being in the playground. Like, tag, you're it. Nah, now you're part of our team.
But I think the audience, because the audience, like, we love the NWO, this is hot, this is great, it's exciting. We love Macho Man.
Yeah.
Sure. Why not?
Or it's a case of Macho Man being like, oh yeah, I want to be cool.
That
Let
too.
me join your gang.
That very much as well. And I think, you know, it's easy to kind of in the moment be like, it doesn't matter, it's hot, it's great. But I just think it's so outrageous to think that such a huge story would never even be. And, you know, they do stuff later where, like, there's tensions with Hogan and Macho is one of the guys to break away from the NWO and feud with Hogan and stuff like that. But there's never, like, the reason I joined this. And to leave that, like, there as it is, like, the idea of that happening in modern times is completely bananas. That's such a huge... you know, I think we were likening it to, like, just say, like, randomly one episode of SmackDown you're watching, and I don't know, Sami Zayn comes out and he's like, he's just joined Solo Sikoa's gang.
Yeah.
And we never say why.
No.
But wrestling is hot right now, and that group probably needs more stars. So he is.
Yeah.
The end, you know? Probably the main reason for Randy ultimately joining was that we wanted to have someone to work with another guy who was on the way up and someone who benefited greatly from the NWO storyline, which is DDP.
Yeah.
And I don't think that I fully grasped when we did the DDP episode how instrumental the NWO and Randy was to his career, because that is, you know, again, I'm trying to dispel the myth that the NWO just buried everyone and all the good guys got squashed and all that. Boy, oh boy,
DDP came out so well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. It's Kevin Sullivan who was the booker at the time. He really he was obsessed with these guys feuding. I think it was his decision to have Randy join the NWO so that they could continue this feud between him and DDP.
And they have DDP, like, one of the first guys who is recruited and refuses to join the NWO.
Yeah.
Which makes it, like, really, like, you know... Like,
it's really shocking. Like,
yeah, because it's like, why wouldn't you? Like, every kind of vaguely mid-card person will join... You want to be like Michael Wall Street, don't you? Join the gang,
obviously.
you know? So, yeah, I think DDP gains a huge amount from the NWO group. The crowd's reactions when he fights them off, and he's always outnumbered. Yeah, he gets beaten down, but the few times where he comes out and he survives... massive.
Yeah.
The Giant as well. You have not seen a crowd come alive like the fucking Giant coming out and just going, ah, and all the NWO guys run away. And I will tell you now, in 2026, the year of our Lord, I will defer to my wife, this man who I've accused him of everything from murder to being the worst wrestler on earth. We got some Lex Luger fans
We
in
got
the
some
house.
Lex Luger fan. I knew it would happen. I had a feeling.
Because I was watching all the Nitros, I'm like, still don't like him. And then
Yeah.
recently I was like, well, some of those promos where he's like, because he's marble mouthed, he's like, the Stinger, we really need you to come out and help us because we're getting our butts kicked. I don't know what I'm saying. And like, he embodies that kind of like, we're going to lose this, that desperation, which is kind of really, you know, that's really exciting and whatnot in its own way. Plus,
it's partly that rack attack. Is that what it's called? Rack attack?
that's Nikki Bella's finish.
It's the same move though, isn't it?
The torture rack, yeah.
Okay,
You bring
yeah.
him up. He racks some folks.
Yeah, and he racks some big fucking boys.
So when he comes out and I see, you know, Hogan in the ring, Kevin Nash in the ring, or maybe when he's in there in the NWO, the Giant in the ring, and I stand up and I shout at my TV screen, "Rack him, Lex," and then he does, and then people
pretty
throw
cool.
sodas at the person who is being
Yeah.
racked at the same time.
What I appreciate as well is
Great.
it always happens the same way. Is he'll put someone in this attack, this rack attack, as it were. Someone else will
That's
come in.
gimmick infringement.
Someone else will come in and like kick him, so he has to put the guy gently down.
It's a nice move to be put in.
Yeah.
There's a lot of lads where they're like, yeah, actually, I'm feeling a bit tight, Lex. You mind rack? I'll take the rack. No, I'll take the rack. We'll all take the rack, boys. Just don't make me watch any of his matches, okay? That's my one thing I will say. I obviously have to bring up Sting at this point as well.
Yes.
Because the NWO running roughshod comes alongside Sting's kind of exodus into the rafters. You know, listen to the Sting episode for the full details, but the general genesis of the gimmick is, let's do a little bit of the Crow, let's do a little bit of the Undertaker, let's have a Dark Avenger watching over, not so silently, let's just mind, in terms of him getting involved in the action. He gets in there quite thick and fast,
Yeah.
and it is electric and chaotic and just pure late 90s gold, and everything that's fun and exciting about Nitro as a show is when Sting and the NWO tangle. It's fucking great.
It is, and there's a lot of stuff in the book we were reading about Sting learning the rigging.
Yeah, because, you know, coming down in, you know, through the NWO, this guy just been dropped down from the rafters.
Apparently, the very first time he saw it being done, where he was like shown, I forget his first name, but it's a guy called Edwards who was always up in the rafters.
The stunt
with Sting.
coordinator
Stunt
guy,
coordinator,
yeah.
And the very first time they were going to show Sting, like, this is what we're going to do. This is you, basically, this big sandbag we've got.
Because the difficulty is to drop them down so fast, someone that heavy, and then immediately stop right when their feet are coming towards the end. So they wake him up at like 2 in the morning.
2:30 in the morning,
We figured it out. Here's a 400-pound bag of sand.
We've got it. It's all perfect. This is going to be you. You're the sandbag, and we're going to just drop it from this rafter. And as you'll see, it's perfect. And they drop it from the rafter, and it just explodes.
The idea of
Sting seeing that and being like, "That's me, is it?"
every time you see Sting up in the rafters looking down solemnly, he's just seeing that burst
Yeah.
bag of sand. Da, 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 da.
And apparently there was like so much training involved. Like, obviously all the engineering is magnificently done. The fact that they managed to pull it off safely every single time is a feat.
You know, a huge crazy part of that as well, you know, is the fact that Nitro would be running on such a kind of a, wow, we're doing this now. You know,
Yeah.
the camera cuts, and, you know, there'll be times where they'll literally have them in the rig, they're about to go, and then the camera, oh, this bit went long, re-rig, you know.
Yeah.
So this is like a military operation.
But there was so much training involved from Sting's side as well. Apparently, he would fly out to LA to do practice runs. Edwards would take Sting to Calabasas to do rock climbing and cliff climbing there. Then they went to Malibu Canyon for rappelling. Then they went to indoor rock climbing places and rappelled there.
Suddenly that year off seems a little less cushy. You know, people are like, oh, he just hung around in the rafters for a year. Well, he was doing a lot of stuff, and probably this, and he had to arrive 2 hours before the show to
Yeah.
get rigged up, and he left an hour out. So he was there longer than anyone on any given day.
What I love about it is like the idea that like kayfabe Sting did that stuff as well.
Yes.
And the thought as well of someone in LA wandering around, like they go to their regular rock climbing class and there's Sting, like full face paint.
Yeah, we've got a vulture flying around.
I got to learn how to do a figure 8 knot.
I think that, like, stuff just being cool and not making sense, that's so much
Yeah.
of it. And if there's one thing WCW are guilty of at this point is when they're hot and people like the hits, baby, we play the hits. Maybe sometimes we'll try something new, like, hey, Sting has that vulture this week, and he comes down to the ring to end the show, and there's meant to be a note tied on him. but the note has gotten lost, so it ends with Eric Bischoff trying to reach for a
Pouring
note
a
that's not
vulture.
there. But I counted, I think, throughout our watching, 27 instances of a fake Sting coming out,
Oh yeah.
and then the announcers being hoodwinked by the fake Sting,
Yeah.
and then the fake Sting being revealed to be like either being Nash or Hall, as it was. Generally, it was Jeff Farmer, who was NWO Sting and basically
Right.
a full member of the group. Or real Sting would send out fake Stings,
Yeah.
and he would be amongst them. And look, I'm not saying that we live in an age where they give you the same ding dong each and every week. Not necessarily. There's certainly a lot of repetition in wrestling at the moment in the last few years, for sure. But my God, I think all of 97 it felt like
Yeah.
it was the same few beats. Have a match, NWO run out, here comes Luger, here comes DDP, down comes Sting. Is it a fake Sting? Is it a real Sting?
Yeah.
No one knows. I'm not gonna lie, I popped almost every single time. And then if it was week to week, I think it was actually quite friendly for fans to jump on who maybe hadn't followed since the start.
Yeah.
You could jump onto an episode and think this is the first part of this story. The mysterious Avenger Sting is coming out. But once it stopped working, doing the same things over and over again after that fact
Yeah.
is a difficulty. And as great as the great Sting moments were, I think you're seeing, though, at this point, a continual use of bits that are very exciting and the fans still love it. And at the same time, you're reaching out into the pop culture world and proving that wrestling, and never mind WCW, which is the uncool wrestling company within the uncool world of wrestling, now they're cutting edge. All that stuff we're talking about the pop culture, it's not just for show. You have probably one of the most recognizable, before people had computers, that they weren't the most clicked on, but the most talked about person in
Yeah.
all of entertainment, and that's Dennis Rodman.
Yeah.
Being brought into the fold.
I love how he was brought into the fold in particular because he actually was approached by WBF to join their company and make an appearance for them.
Yes.
He was offered $500,000 and because he loved Hulk Hogan so much, he approached WCW and was like, hey, look, WWF has approached me and asked me to join them. Do you want to match their offer? In which case, I'll just come join you guys instead. He obviously wanted to be in the NWO, I think.
I think he realized that, because his
it's
whole
way cooler.
his thing was that he was, controversial, and he did things like he dressed up in women's clothing, wore makeup. He had kind of a reputation while playing NBA basketball, like he had headbutted players. He'd been missed practice, but he was part of like the winning team. He was part of like a really successful team, and he himself was like an absolute savant in basketball as well, kind of a very very indisposable on that team and part of their victories. And they kind of really played with that. There was a huge amount of controversy where you would see Hogan and Bischoff, because they were mates, they would go to the NBA matches that he was at, and they'd sit in the front row with the NWO shirts on. They even allegedly worked a little bit of NWO storyline into the NBA finals, where him and Karl Malone, who were kind of, they were on the outs or whatever it was, and they started, I think Eric said that as long as it didn't happen during official play, when the whistle is blown, you guys can go over and, talk smack to each other on the court and all that. And the sports commentators and columnists and analysts were fucking disgusted. Bob Costas, etc. The idea that the NBA finals had been ruined by this fake wrestling bullshit. But Rodman, huge difference maker to WCW at the time. Massive cool factor, cultural cachet, whatever you want to call it. Him and Karl Malone, like that whole business, so successful. That did huge business for the WCW and for the NWO. Sting and Hogan, as we were saying, you can be jazz, but we have our lines along the way. There are notes that we have to hit. This is where the song ends.
Yeah.
And Starrcade 97 was where that album was going to come to a big crescendo. WCW were going to have their sweeping victory. They were going to take back the championships that had been lost from them. They were going to win control of Nitro. Eric Bischoff was going to get his. Hall and Nash were going to get theirs. And Hogan was going to take on Sting, who was going to wrestle his first match in over a year and a half, take back the WCW championship, and even foil a plot from that evil ex-NWO referee Nick Patrick to try and screw him over with a fast count. Now, we did Starrcade 97 on Pay-Per-View Classic.
Yep.
And it was easy to see that the whole thing was a bit of a mess. That just as a side effect as well, also ruined Bret Hart's chances
Yeah,
in
thanks
WCW.
for that.
What a big mess and stink he made, where even to manage to the hottest thing in wrestling at the time,
Yeah,
Bret Hart
literally.
managed to get ruined on his first day, and he wasn't even wrestling in the match. What happened at Starrcade '97, Joe? Short version, if possible.
Well, what? As in, like, what the audience saw?
What did the audience see, and what did the fans perhaps expect to see, logically?
Well, what the fans saw was Hogan just win.
And boy, did he. Talk about putting that stinger away resolutely.
Yeah, just like a normal count. 1, 2, 3. Hogan wins. Lol. That's it.
Limp-wristed account as it was and all. The
Yeah.
idea was that Nick was meant to go fast. He didn't go fast.
But also the idea was he was meant to go slow, allegedly.
And Hogan claims that Sting was meant to have kicked out.
Yep.
And Sting didn't kick out.
That's what I think my opinion is. I buy that version of it. I can't believe I'm agreeing with Hogan of all people.
Honey, we're about to raise a child in this world, and if you're gonna bring him up right and proper, you can't be telling him to believe anything that comes out of Terry Bollea's mouth.
I don't believe anything that comes out of Terry Bollea's mouth except for this.
Yeah, we're watching that, and all these people, Little Onion, they're all here to see Hulk Hogan. He's the reason. He's the reason they're all here. Okay.
I like how in the A&E documentary, at this point in the documentary, Hulk Hogan admits he doesn't know who Bret Hart is.
Some bony jabroni from I think he's from Canada or somewhere like that. I'm not really
I've
sure.
never seen him wrestle before.
It's from somewhere up north, like Alaska or Greenland or some other U.S. territory. I'm not sure, brother.
But I buy that Sting, apparently, so if you have listened to our episode about Sting, you'll know that he was really struggling when he had to be alone in the rafters all by himself.
Yep, he had a lot of personal issues at the time.
A lot of drug
issues at the time.
And his drug issues weren't, unlike a lot of the members of the NWO who had drug issues, it didn't lead him to party more. It led him to isolation and exclusion. And
the idea is that he turned up at Starrcade in
kind of fucked up. Yeah.
Cody actually even there was a promo a while ago where he was like, "You show up in worse shape than Sting at Starrcade '97," and it got a small pop, like insider wrestling right there.
And apparently he hadn't been like training and keeping in shape and stuff as well, so he was much smaller than. I mean, you can actually see in Starrcade he is smaller than he normally is. I buy that. I buy that he was maybe not in the best mental and physical shape. Maybe he didn't kick out when he was supposed to. I don't know if I buy Nick Patrick's version of events is that everyone came to him
and told him different things. Yeah.
I don't know if I believe that.
Oh, I do.
You do?
I do, because
he has no reason to lie.
I think this is one of these things where it's like you're sat there, you're listening to you're listening to your jazz or whatever it is, or maybe you're listening to a Captain Beefheart Trout Mask replica and you're like, no, I'm just fucked up enough that it all makes perfect sense. And then at the end you're like, wait a minute, he's just making a load of stupid noises. What? No. They were just making it up and no one knew what was going on the whole time. No. I feel this was very much the chickens coming home to roost moment where they were flying by the seat of their pants. There wasn't clear lines of communication, and people were afraid to confront people with certain info and thinking that the better way to tell Hulk Hogan something is to go through an intermediary, or the better way to tell Eric Bischoff something is to ignore something another intermediary said. And all that just came together to create a tangled mess where the two lads should have sat down with the referee and the producer of the match and go, here's the finish. Okay. And there we go.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. That's why you got what happened.
Yeah.
You can't play a game of whispers when it's this big. This is the big culmination of the whole thing.
And it would be one thing if it just ended up with the pin and the count as normal, the normal count.
Stop. I'm a bitter loser and I can't get over it.
This can't happen to anyone else ever again.
What?
Like, what?
And no referees are ever going to be in wrestling. Good. What?
What's going on?
And then the way the match ends, it just kind of looked like Bret Hart's like, yeah, you lose. Give him the belt. And then Sting grabs the belt and he's like, oh, mamacita. You want some Latino heat?
After 2 years of saying nothing, of just being in the rafters and looking sad and being really cool and mysterious, he comes in, gets cleanly pinned, mutters something indecipherable that we still don't know what he says to this day, and ends with the words "mamacita."
What an it's you talk about WrestleMania 10 and we were like, you could say that's a finale for
Yes.
wrestling. The credits roll on
Yeah.
wrestling or whatever it was. I know we felt that way about like WrestleMania 40 as well. It's like, roll the credits there,
They clearly want that with this because everyone comes out to support Sting.
And the crowd are still like, the crowd still make noise. I think that's the thing. Is like the crowd when wrestling is as hot as, and I don't think people could really fully grasp how goddamn white hot they were at that point in time.
Yeah.
It's like, and I've watched all of the Attitude Era, and I'd be like, you know, you'd be struggling at the peak of the Attitude Era to pick as consistently a hot audience. You got hot crowds in 98 and 99 WWF, don't get me wrong, but a consistently hot audience who are being served dusty finishes, a load of nonsensical garbage, you know, compared to WWF where it's like you've got compelling stories, good quality matches, loads of main eventers on the rise. And here it's kind of like they're giving you a lot of fluff, really exciting fluff. That's how hot the audience were, that they still cheered what you just described as, like, Kevin Nash described it as like the Hindenburg. They're all there in the monitor going, oh, the humanity. Except he's not there. He's at home because he had too many pot brownies on Christmas Day. You drank too much wine, didn't you, Kev?
I love that story because in it, the paramedics are like, oh no, he's tried to commit suicide because he's taken so many drugs.
It's fucking Christmas, man.
It's Christmas.
You know?
It's a normal Christmas day.
That story changed over the years, didn't it? It went from being, I picked up a bag that I didn't know there were weights into, I had too much dinner and too many drugs. Well, that's just a very small drop in a very large ocean of drugs and red wine, brother. I think the immediate aftermath of this, because you can just see the crowds are still big, but man, it's like someone got the temperature and went, ew.
Oh, yeah.
Your dad came in and fiddled with the thermostat.
Yeah.
15's plenty, all right?
Yeah.
And the crowds are still huge. They even get bigger. They're filling at the Georgia Dome.
Yeah.
They're 40,000 people to see a Nitro, record gates, record merchandise sales. But the thing about it, you've been shot in the gut, and it's bad, but it takes a lot of time to die from. Say it with me, Eric. You're gonna be okay. I'm gonna be. You're going. WCW's gonna be okay. You know what'll solve this, Joe? Let's add 2 hours of television time to this notorious work-shy roster.
Great.
Thunder debuts, and some of the clips of Thunder that we watched is some of the most embarrassingly low energy. Like, you thought Hogan wasn't trying when he was throwing punches on Nitro? Baby, these Thunders, they all look like they'd rather be anywhere else.
What I like to think about at this time period as well is what's happening over in the WWF. Because what's happening there is like the hottest, coolest shit that's like ever happened in wrestling history. It's like all starting now.
Stone Cold Steve Austin, Mick Foley, Mr. McMahon character coming on. You've got The Rock on the ascent. You've got like really, really exciting television, pushing the edge, pushing it in all different directions. Mike Tyson showing up. Oh, we've got the pop culture now, actually.
Yeah.
We've got a rapist, actually, now. Yeah. And as well as that, you've got, DX, doing what kind of instrumental, really.
So that's the point, actually.
This.
Six has left at this point, hasn't he?
Yeah, Six leaves shortly into 1998. And the reality of it was that he asked for more money and they sent him on his way.
Stupid. The amount of money they were pissing away on nothing anyway. Just give them the money.
I think it does again speak to no one in the NWO was indispensable other than Hulk Hogan was kind of the relief at the time. Because, Scott Hall was, you could tell the Scott Hall that debuts in 96 versus the Scott Hall who's floating around in 1998.
Yeah.
That motivation's maybe been lost a bit. And this idea that you're going to sign for more money in less dates, when you become super hot like they did, guess what? We're doubling the dates now. You're going to do Thunder and you're going to do Nitro and you're going to do WCW Saturday Night as well. And there's more pay-per-views. So they ended up working almost as many dates as they were with Vince. So he gets kind of burnt out on the road as well.
Yeah.
The kind of preceding months you have, the title gets held up, Sting wins it back, but they don't capture that original magic again at that point.
No.
And then you have the NWO going into familiar territory with storylines about them being fractured, about, Randy's going to leave the group, there's tension with Kevin Nash and Hulk Hogan. But a lot of that was mimicking the fact that there was real-life tension backstage at this point.
Yeah.
People were starting to covet more of the NWO's success and blame one another for the NWO's failings. And it is probably on this point then that we end up having a formal split in the group. As 1998 rolls on, the Wolfpack is formed. So the Wolfpack is born out of an idea that Kevin Nash and certain members of the group are popular, and Hogan is kind of representing another element of the NWO that will always be hated and despised. I think it is worth mentioning that like the audiences, depending on where they were, as noted by Scott Hall's survey time, you would have some crowds that were like fully involved with the NWO and they loved them, or there were crowds that were more like traditional and loved WCW. Look at the old NWA hotbeds. If they went to the Carolinas, etc., they have a lot more anti-NWO sentiment. But there was no doubt that there were certain parts of the group that were more popular. And I think also as well, necessity at this point meant that Hall and Nash needed to be separated from Hogan, it felt like. That they needed to find their own thing. I do believe a lot of the genesis of this element of the storyline is from Eric Bischoff admitting that he just wanted to kind of keep things going, keep making money, and try and keep her lit, so to speak, without kind of abandoning the thing that was still, even with the reduced creative satisfaction, was still packing the houses. But I don't know, Joe. I feel like once we got to the Wolfpack stuff, even though they were an insanely popular group, and I would say they are quite closely aligned with DX in terms of popularity of being kind of a renegade group that fans really like enjoyed or whatever. They loved all the individual members and they were all entertaining. But I felt like this is a point where your enjoyment of the NWO storyline was certainly on the wane somewhat.
Yeah, definitely. I don't get the Wolfpack.
Well, I guess the Wolfpack idea is that the NWO was founded on principles, goddammit, and they don't want the group to be just henchmen in service of Hollywood Hogan.
Right.
So the idea is that the Wolfpack is going to be the splinter group that's going to break away, and they're going to be people that are all aligned together for being cool. And I don't think the Wolfpack wants to destroy WCW, but they are a distinct group. They're not part of WCW.
Right.
And it's Kevin Nash, and he brings in some of his core members. And you might think Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, right?
Yeah.
Wrong. Scott Hall is part of Hulk Hogan's group, which is then referred to as the Hollywood version of the NWO. They keep the black and white.
That's one of my main issues with the Wolfpack.
Yeah, where's our real life? Our best friends are apparently enemies now.
But like they were
it's not believable.
They were the Wolfpack.
Yeah, they are the Wolfpack.
And now they're the Wolfpack. They're not the Wolfpack anymore.
And the other member of the Wolfpack is in another company.
Yeah.
So this Wolfpack starts off with Kevin Nash, Kurt Hennig.
Yeah.
Because when I think of a cool group that has awesome rap music, I think of a guy who legitimately missed several tapings of WCW to go to a buck hunting tournament with Big Bubba Rogers. Excellent. Other members of the group, Lex Luger.
Yeah.
And Sting. And I think that's where I was like, what? Because when they joined the group, Larry Zbyszko, who's another, like, along with DDP and Sting and The Giant and Lex Luger, a guy who I just fell in love with as a great babyface that the audience love, is Larry Zbyszko, the commentator, the old man who's like,
old man, he's 45.
I want to go play golf and I don't like this Scott Hall guy. He's a bum. I never liked you anyway. I'm going to stop commentating to turn around and look at the fans because I love being cheered, Tony. Fucking great. But when Sting and Luger joined, he literally commented goes, no, they're joining the NWO. And then the following week, Tony Schiavone's like, the NWO Wolfpack, they love to have fun, guys. The fans love the Wolfpack and they're cool. So it just became they're the cool guy group who the fans loved and they were popular, but storyline wise, bit of a like Sting wearing an NWO shirt.
I don't like it.
Sting in red and black is weird. That face paint is weird. I don't care that his son dressed up like that and it's iconic and I don't care. I don't like it.
I don't like it.
The more I see it, the less I like it.
I
have seen all of it.
I used to work in branding and I feel very strongly about wrestling branding. And I really feel like they fucked it up with this.
But it's just the NWO logo, but red, right?
My issue isn't with the logo, it's with the brand guidelines of the characters themselves. Lex Luger is Team WCW. Sting is Sting. You can't just now have an amalgamation of someone from Team WCW, someone who is Sting, and someone who is core NWO all gang up together to create an offshoot of the NWO that is the Wolfpack. I would prefer it if it was just the Wolfpack and it was nothing to do with the NWO.
Yeah, I think using the NWO branding was kind of a little bit a little bit lazy.
Like, what's the point of Sting and Lex joining this off? I just don't.
Because if it was
get
just the Wolfpack and with the red wolf shirt, I think I would agree with you that it could probably stand on its own 2 feet. But it's association. I think that shows that WCW was very enamored, and Bischoff particularly, the creative minds, the producers, the people who were making the money off it, were so enamored with those 3 letters that they couldn't move away from it, you know? And I think that's one of the things that was different in the WWF at the time, was that if we had a new group, we just gave it a new... It wasn't like there was DX 2000, Latino DX, you know, DXB team. It was just, we had DX, and then we didn't have DX, and then we moved on. We had another thing. You know, there was new stuff. This felt like we were retreading, rehashing. But it's a different color, you know? I think there's one person, if I was to point out and said it made the Wolfpack legitimately cool, different, and connected with the audience, and had that hot wire into mainstream rap, hip-hop culture, it was Conan. Who I think... You're smiling. I think he's instrumental.
No, I'm not smiling about that. I'm not smiling. I agree. He lends an air of legitimacy to the Wolfpack.
There's a different reason you're smiling, I think, Joe. Because he's a long-time member of the New World Order, was Conan. Very
noticeable, actually. Once you get your eye in, you start to realise that he's everywhere.
So we heard this. It was like, long, he'd said it himself many times in interviews, etc. He's like, oh, you know, saw Hulk Hogan on screen, I make sure I get myself over there, getting the promo still, whatever. Cool, funny story. But once you're watching it all, folks...
Yeah, once you're watching hours upon hours upon hours of NWO and Wolfpack footage...
He's shoving people out of the way.
He's literally
He's elbowing, like, main eventers in
get
the fucking... Get out of the way. Hey, can I help you? Oh, no, Terry's been knocked to the outside. Oh, no, I'm going to take a bump from an invisible punch to end up beside him and rub his shoulders or whatever it was.
It would make a great drinking game for you to watch any of these compilation videos about the NWO or Wolfpack and take a drink every time Conan moves his way closer to Hulk Hogan.
It's very impressive.
It's so funny.
But with the Wolfpack, because you want them to be this cool, unabashedly good guy group, you know, chat along with the audience, you know, we're all on this team, and make the original NWO seem like bad guys by comparison. And I think, you know, it was mentioned in the NWO book that we read. I don't think it'd be understated the fact that this guy, who was playing kind of a Cholo gang member despite being Cuban, but he was getting audiences in like Kentucky and Arkansas and Mississippi to chant along with him in Spanish and say "Orale, viva mi raza." You know, that's really like he
cool,
just made it cool. You know, he added that level of kind of like, you know, you could see all the guys hovering, particularly Nash.
Yes.
Because Conan is like the first guy he brings in, because it's like, we need a guy that makes us seem like the cool group that's kind of rapping and, you know, counterculture and all that. Conan is that, and they're like, they need that from him, and he is the ballast that holds that ship afloat in terms of being cool. But they're being like Lex Luger in his fucking jeans, you know, being like, yeah, for life, too sweet. That's kind of hilarious to me.
And chatty Sting.
Yow! I love talking, man.
All of a sudden, he is the chattiest fucking wrestler.
And I'm red and black. Fuck me, man.
Yeah, I don't like it. It's all wrong.
We don't really get the full-on, you know, it's NWO warfare now. It's like, all right, Hogan's going to fight Nash, and we're going to have the Wolfpack versus the NWO. They kind of float around each other and whatnot. You do have some kind of betrayals where, like, people will leave one group and then join the other. Hogan starts to stack the NWO Hollywood with real great top luminaries like The Disciple.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. That's the Boonie Man. It was the Bag Man all along. He didn't put the Nasty Boys in, but we have like Bryan Adams and Stevie Ray, and it becomes another one of these things where you're adding so many members now where, like, Stevie Ray, for instance, refused to be interviewed for that NWO book because he's embarrassed about his time in the NWO.
Wow.
Whereas at the time, you could see, like, that man, more than anything, like, legit wanted to be part of that group because they thought that was my ticket to the next level.
Yeah.
And now it's a ticket to kind of mediocrity, it feels like.
Irrelevance.
But like WCW, if they had any story beats, they struggled to tell them. The week where Nash forms the Wolfpack comes a week after he's there with Hogan, and like, oh, Hogan hits him mistakenly when he holds someone out. The week before that, Kevin Nash said he was going to shoot Hulk Hogan with a gun between the eyes. And then like the next week, it's like, oh, but we're still friends. Whose side is he on? So they are kind of hesitant to actually move forward because Hogan, with his creative control, can kind of put the kibosh on things, so they kind of float around a little bit instead.
Is this around the same time that Eric stops being as involved behind the scenes as he used to be?
Yeah, where they very generously in the recent documentary are like, kind of had less influence. I kind of, took some time. I saw that woke was going to kill WCW.
Yeah.
So I decided to, and it's like, you were fired. Like, you were told to go home, pack your bags, and go fucking fly fish, or whatever it is you do out there. Like, go get a long mortgage that will later be consolidated by a podcaster. And do it now, sir. But yeah, he was less at the helm. And there was, like, kind of, a push to make WCW a more family-friendly product. But I think that wasn't because we hate what you're doing. It was just like, let's get more tickets, let's get more families.
Yeah.
Maybe we can keep this thing going a little bit longer. Kevin Nash is also involved in creative at this point in time. And many people say, Joe, that Kevin Nash kills WCW.
I'm one of those people.
Why did Kevin? Fuck, man, shit. Okay, whoa, okay. Like, why? Because it didn't.
Well, you did.
But did you kill WCW, Kev? Because I don't know. A lot of people say that you did.
Yeah.
Did you kill it?
Because he did.
What did he do, Joe?
He's behind the finger poke of doom.
And what came before the finger poke of doom?
Yes. He ended Goldberg's streak.
That's a 1-2 punch right there. I think a lot of people are like, oh, no, that killed WCW. No, that killed WCW. Folks, that happened one night after the other.
Yeah.
Like, they were like, that's the same event. And Kevin's like, look, I did beat myself to beat Goldberg, but I also beat myself to lose via finger poke the next night.
Yeah.
So I'm not selfish.
Oh.
That's like saying, look, I didn't clean the bedroom, but I burnt down the house. So, like, I have no bedroom now. So stop complaining, Mom. This is the cool zone. You're not allowed in my embers. It feels like one of those moments in time where you see a lot of people like kind of waking up out of stasis.
Yeah.
Where like, we mentioned, they were into 97. Oh my God, you ruined Starrcade, you ruined the Sting storyline, whatever it is. But we still kept going and fans were still there. And there was still loads of cool, hot, exciting stuff. But it feels like when the finger poke happened, and it happened again in the Georgia Dome, folks, 40,000 people all said, fuck off. All at once, where it was like one time too many. And you've been shot in the gut, but now you've taken one in the side of the head as well, It feels like. Not so hot, I don't think. Hogan, by the way, has, washed his hands of it, said it was the worst thing he was ever involved with.
Hogan calls it the finger point of doom.
PowerPoint. But yeah, he denies like, any involvement in it. It was a terrible idea. I think they were trying to like get people as opposed to entertain people.
Yeah.
This leads to the forming of the near final iteration of the NWO, which is the NWO Wolfpack Elite, which is a joining of the Wolfpack and Hogan's Hollywood group together to form a super team with Hogan at the top, who's also going to become president of the United States of America. And we shed off like Luger and Sting, but like people start getting injured. Scott Hall has his foot run over and has to go away for a while. Hogan gets injured as well. It's a mess. The whole thing basically fizzles out into nothingness. It's not the greatest end of the storyline, I don't think, for it to fizzle out. Like, would you have thought when we started that we would... Like, I thought we'd get a bad ending at least. Not kind of
an ending.
Yeah, this is like Sopranos, but...
Well...
But except all the other characters continue on for ages afterwards, doing nothing of import.
If the final scene of The Sopranos was in slow motion... and faded out to black instead of the hard cut.
Very slowly over the course of a long, long time. And yeah, the NWO has another kind of breath of life in the end of 1999 when Vince Russo becomes the writer. And he's like, oh, the coolest thing you guys ever did was the NWO. So he brings back the NWO as the NWO 2000.
No. It's
going to have Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Bret Hart, Jeff Jarrett, all the top guys. And immediately, that's when, I think within a week or two of that, that's when Bret gets kicked in the head by Goldberg.
Yeah.
So the evil leader of the NWO is, basically got a stroke and can't wrestle anymore. Scott Hall gets hurt, and that kind of fades into nothingness as well. Also, another snake-bitten,
just
cursed
sad.
Iteration. Yeah, it is, isn't it?
It didn't need to happen like this.
There was a attempt to bring it back into WWE, they did touch on this in the documentary. We did mention a little bit earlier when Hogan, Hall, and Nash could get brought back in. But unfortunately, Hulk Hogan was simply too popular and beloved by the fans.
Oh, yeah, of course. Right, yes. So he got cheers when he was in his match against The Rock. And so immediately he went home and got changed into the red and yellow, and that was that.
Yeah, that was it. It was just too popular, brother. But like where I'm watching it right now, and it just seeing the heart is not in it. Like where Hogan doesn't really want to do it, I don't think. And you point out as well, like Hogan looks the same, whereas Hall and Nash look like...
They look a lot older.
Yeah, like being rich ex-wrestlers didn't suit them so hot, it doesn't seem like.
I think it's the partying.
It catches up with you.
Yeah.
And that's really sad about Scott as well, is that as the NWO storyline progressed, even though so much of it, including Sting, I think was attributable to his creativity, seeing him go from being a real driving force to being just one of the guys,
Yeah.
to then being like so blatantly and brazenly exploited with the kind of he's an alcoholic storyline.
Oh, God.
It's really sad.
It is, yeah.
It wasn't a great end to things. It lives on in infamy, but also in my mind, despite the fact that Eric Bischoff is a man who was burnt out and had his chickens, which he counted before they hatched, all come home to roost and explode in his face. It is one of the most exciting wrestling storylines or periods of wrestling I've ever watched. It's fucking phenomenally entertaining stuff.
It is sometimes.
What were your main, enjoyable moments versus the main kind of things that frustrated you, I guess?
All of my main enjoyable moments are from the first 6 months to maybe a year.
Yeah.
But it goes downhill quite fast. As soon as they start adding new members like Buff Bagwell and IRS and stuff like that, it's not cool anymore.
They didn't
me,
seem
anyway.
to know what made it cool quite quickly. But the original thing that was making it cool kind of overshadowed a lot of its failings. I do think there's a point in mid-97 where I'm like, hey, I fucking love this. But I love that in the same way that I would eat pizza every night and it would probably kill me. When they figured out what was working, they did literally do the same thing.
Yeah,
week
again,
after week
again,
after week
again.
after week. And the only difference after Starrcade is the crowds were like, oh, And then, later on, they fully turned on it. There are many iterations of the NWO that we might want to touch on briefly. We, of course, had the NWO B team, which included all the also-rans and the names like Horace Hogan and
Is that actually what
Vincent.
they were called? The B team?
The commentators would disparagingly call them the B team, yeah.
Wow.
But it was very much by many people viewed as the writing on the wall that this is no longer cool, and they all just kind of flowed in different directions.
Right.
We also had the LWO,
Oh, yeah.
which was kind of something that we were excited to look into. Because we love
That
Eddie.
had potential.
It did have potential. Love Eddie Guerrero.
Yeah.
Love the Luchadors. What did you remember about the LWO?
So the LWO was Eddie Guerrero basically saying that it was unfair that the cruiserweight division had been entirely relegated to doing opening matches and jobbing for the NWO.
And they're often just, all bundled together in cars.
Yeah.
They all had to fight each other most of the time
Share
as well.
hotel rooms.
And this was, again, another thing where that's a bit of real life.
Exactly, yeah. This is
seeing
kind
it
of-
on screen, yeah.
I feel like early LWO, I say early, it's not like it was very long, but the LWO formation is a lot more similar to the true NWO message than what it became after 1997.
That's true, because it is about, hey, we don't like the status quo.
Yeah.
We're going to shake things up. But the problem with the LWO, and we watching it, it was just kind of a bit miserable because they ended up just doing exactly what they did before.
They've got a T-shirt now.
Yeah, they got a T-shirt now, but they always had way too big T-shirts on them as well.
Yeah.
Rey Mysterio being, you better wear this big duvet cover, and he's like, I don't want to,
Mommy, I threw up.
But you have Eddie Guerrero with the cool fucking wrestlers like La Parka and El Dandy being like, we're gonna fucking take over. We're coming for you, Eric Bischoff and the NWO, and then we're gonna do that by exclusively fighting other luchadors on Thunder and Saturday Night.
Yeah.
And I think the one time they did come near the NWO, they got murderized by them.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, these got beaten up, laid out, and then they did a thing where Ric Flair was literally like, "I'm telling you guys not to be the LWO anymore," and they didn't.
Oh.
It was a cool shirt, and you could tell there were certain fans who really wanted it.
Yeah.
And there were also certain fans, by the way, down south who really didn't like the LWO.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, because he had Eddie Guerrero being like, "We're talking about his heritage of being
Yeah,
Latino." People are like, boo, don't do that. We only like when Conan talks about tossing salad, not like this. The BWO from ECW.
Oh, nice.
The Blue World Order. I wonder if it would take on any more relevancy for you having seen the the actual NWO. A sloppy parody, a dirty parody.
I haven't seen much of the BWO, to be honest.
There's not a whole lot of it, to be fair.
No.
You know, you've got. I was like, okay, I'll watch it again. You know, them just doing their imitation, their parody, because I think the only thing you can do when something is cool to parody it is do it as being really uncool.
Yes, definitely.
That was something that Heyman and ECW understood implicitly well, was that we will counter the cool, not by saying that it's crap.
No.
You know, you counter Goldberg by having Gilbert. It's like, it used to seem like you guys are kind of intimidated by Goldberg. But if you have Hollywood Nova being like, what do you mean Santa with muscles only made $6, dude? That's not good enough. Or the Blue Meanie being like, I've got the Blue World Order, and then bringing in a couple of bags of takeaway. And that is definitely those guys' dinner, like,
Yeah.
you know? So I really, you know, that for me, the fact that has been enduring, and the fact that those guys actually own the copyright on that now.
Oh, do they?
They do, and they have the t-shirts,
That's
and they got themselves
nice.
some wrestling games and all that. So I'm like, hey, at least someone got money from NWO residuals.
Yeah.
Which brings me on to NWO Japan.
Oh, yes.
It's a very interesting story about that, where you had, of course, Masahiro Chono, who's one of our faves. Definitely going to do an episode of him in the future.
Yep.
NWO Sting was part of that as well.
Really?
Yeah, NWO Sting was cut loads of
Off in
promos in
Japan.
Japan and be like, we're going to take over Japan. That's what's going to happen. Scott Norton was there, and a really cool
Scott Norton.
Scott Norton, yeah, he was big in Japan, man.
Wow.
By the way, my favorite background NWO player. I fucking love Scott
Yeah, you
Norton.
do.
I love him. Who's your favorite background NWO player?
Dusty Rhodes.
You should have seen her, folks. No, as woken up from her nap. No, not Dusty. Do you know the fun story about Dusty Rhodes' Wolfpack jacket? His cool red leather coat he had.
Oh, this is something Cody's talked about, isn't it?
He was trying to find the. He had a custom made, apparently, this red leather jacket when he joined the NWO, and it's not in storage with anything else. And we've been led to believe that an unnamed sister, Teal Rhodes,
Oh, who could it be?
definitely Teal Rhodes, aka the biggest star in the Rhodes family,
Definitely.
bigger than Dusty, bigger than Cody, bigger than Dustin.
Bigger liar than all of them, for sure.
She's definitely sold it. So
yeah, definitely.
if you see Conrad wearing it on one of his podcasts coming up next, you'll know where it came from. But yeah, the NWO 2000, you found out about Muta. I didn't know this. This is very interesting.
Oh, you didn't know?
No, I didn't know.
Oh, it's cool. So Muta had an alter ego when he was in New Japan.
So he's Keiji Muto, and then the Great Muta was the kind of face paint
Right.
guy, yeah.
And I don't know which way around it is, but one of them was in the NWO, and then the other alter ego wasn't.
So yeah, Muta was in the NWO, but
Right.
Muto was not in the NWO, which I think is very, very
It's
fucking cool.
so cool.
Yeah. And I think the NWO Japan guys, which was very interesting about it, was that they could tell that the branding was popular. They took it, they ran with it, they kind of made their own thing about it. They had like loads of, you know, feuds for kind of trying to take over New Japan and whatnot. But the sticking point was Chono went to the New Japan president and was like, we're selling, you know, hundreds of these t-shirts per event. You know, people are paying to come to the event and buy the t-shirt and not see the event. Do we get any money? And there was a non-negotiable hard line with Turner. That money is not for you guys. So they just changed the team and they called it Team 2000 instead, which kind of, I think, maybe, you know, was kind of emblematic of like how little importance it really was in the actual wrestling organization. It was an iconic logo, but it didn't serve their purposes.
Yeah.
Because what's the point of having an iconic logo if you can't make money off of it, I guess?
But the trouble is, if then you're going to change the iconic logo to something less iconic, it's not going to make you as much money as you would like it to.
Yeah, I think so. Well, unfortunately, we end our episode today talking about a group that the turmoil in politics which created it and made it exciting, that very same turmoil in politics was probably what dragged it down. I think there were so many issues that the NWO had that weren't NWO issues, and I think they were more WCW issues, mismanagement, too many big egos, too much money on the line, too many people not talking to each other, it not being collaborative, I guess. And I think that people saying, oh, NWO killed WCW, it's like, I don't think that's fair to say, because I think the things that killed WCW would have killed it had that storyline been there or not. What it did do was give it a shot in the arm of super cool, super relevant, on the moment, on the money, pop culture relevance, and something that wrestling had struggled for it to have for at least 10 years at that point. They got in spades, which was you were cool again.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to fuck up being cool in the moment of being cool. But once it slips through your fingers,
It's gone.
It's
That's
gone.
it.
And it's not through lack of trying to bring it back over and over again. And I will say, there's many wrestling podcasters, and I was one of them, who will point to the backstage turmoil or the lack of storyline consistency or even the lack of good matches, and then have you go away with the idea that you should never watch it. And I come here today, cap in hand, begging you, please watch this stuff. Warts and all, because when it's hot and it's good, it is unquestionably my favorite flavor of wrestling ice cream.
Just for Conan chasing Hogan. Just for that alone, it's worth it.
I thought us diving deeper and deeper would make me balk more. Finding out more of the inconsistencies would make me hate it more, or be like, oh, it's so annoying, it's so frustrating. But the fact they're able to make it be this exciting thing with all these problems hanging over them constantly, that for me is like, that's wrestling at its best. You are misdirecting this audience to ignore all the evidence in front of them of the problems at hand, even a lot of the wrestlers as well. A compelling show that I would suggest you watch because of the invested fans and the trash being thrown in the ring and a lot of guys jockeying, trying their hardest to look cool to varying degrees of success. Joe, would you like a complete list of every member of the NWO?
Yes, please. I'm amazed you actually have this.
Let's do our best, folks, shall we?
You're going to lose your voice before reading it to the end because there's so many members.
Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Hulk Hogan, Ted DiBiase, The Giant, Fake Sting, Syxx, Vincent, Nick Patrick, Kyle Petty, the NASCAR driver. The Nasty Boys were technically members for like a second and then were immediately kicked out. AC Green of the Phoenix Suns. He showed up at a taping in an NWO shirt and they implied that he was paid to do so by Ted DiBiase. Miss Elizabeth, Eric Bischoff, Buff Bagwell, Michael Wall Street, Masahiro Chono, Big Bubba, Scott Norton, Macho Man Randy Savage, Dennis Rodman, Great Muta, Conan, Cloudman and Paul Gilmartin. They're the hosts of TBS Dinner and a Movie. That's the thing that RJ City loves so much. Apparently, they were recruited into the NWO when Randy Savage co-hosted an episode with them.
Wow.
Rick Rude, Kurt Hennig, Dusty Rhodes, Brian Adams, Scott Steiner, Brutus the Barber Beefcake, Lex Luger, Bret Hart.
Well, he did wear the t-shirt once.
He doesn't even know if he's in the group, and we're like, well, maybe he's not. Like, representing NWO Hollywood in the War Games, Bret Hart. Yeah. I think he's a member. Antoine Carr, he was part of the Utah Jazz. The entire Cincinnati Reds, that team apparently all came out in NWO shirts under their uniforms at one point. Jeff Jarrett, Don Harris, Ron Harris. That's right, there are Nazis in the NWO. Medeja, April Hunter, Tylene Buck, Pamela Paulshock, Shakira. That's right.
Shakira?
Yeah, it's used as, not that Shakira. Different Shakira.
Okay.
The NWO 2000 had 4 NWO babes.
Wow.
So they had babes that accompanied them to the ring because, just in case you thought the NWO didn't have female members, folks, Booker T and Shawn Michaels, who was briefly a member in the WWE version of that as well. But there's another group we should actually mention as well, folks, because we found out through all of our watching of NWO on WCW Nitro that Hulk Hogan revealed during a special on-location edition.
I was wondering if you were going to mention this.
Of the following announcement was paid for by the New World Order. He was making his movie McKinsey Island, which came out on TBS in 1998, where he revealed that the entire cast and crew had joined the NWO, which means we also have in the NWO Grace Jones, Robert Vaughn, Todd Sheeler, Paul White. Oh, we already knew that anyway, I guess. Isaac C. Singleton Jr., Leah Bryant, Anya Hoffman, Tom Akos, Arena Steamer, Kathleen Smith, William Sharp, Dennis Devon, Willie the Bird, Mr. Whiskers. And also, as well as that, he mentioned that the producers were also members of the NWO. Yeah. And when you're the NWO, you're the NWO for life. Isn't that right? Christina Dubin, Andreas Falshear, Robert Redlin, Andrew Sugarman, Straw Wiseman, and Stephen Edwards, and David Worth. And, of course, Carl Coughlin and Rose Rosen, the editor and the casting director. They work for me, brother. And that, as far as I can tell, is a near exhaustive member of everyone who was in the NWO. Except, of course, if we're not including the NWO Japan, which also included Akira, Big Titan, Hiro Saito, Hiroshi Tenzan, Louis Spicolli, Michiyoshi Ohara, Satoshi Kojima, and Goto. Also should mention as well, during the very end of NWO Wolfpack Elite, Disco Inferno did get his colours, as did David Flair and Tori Wilson, although she was known as Samantha at the time. She had a gun, Joe.
Wow.
And as far as I know, that's a near exhaustive list of every member of the NWO.
Well, are we not counting, though, Kylie Jenner and all the other celebrities that randomly wore NWO t-shirts
No,
because it's cool?
All right, that my response to that is, if you do that, that means everyone in the audience who's wearing a t-shirt is NWO.
Why not?
Because that's not how they do things. There's contracts involved,
Are you
brother.
sure?
Yeah, of course. And Slick Johnson, the referee, he was the NWO 2000's heel referee as well.
Okay.
I'll point that out as well. I think that's near exhaustive. You're definitely going to tell me there's other ones.
Someone will definitely let us know.
100% there's definitely other ones. Because I'm pretty sure he's going to say that everyone on Three Ninjas at High Mega Moon Mountain, brother, they work for me. Well, folks, that's going to do it for our NWO chat. Let's throw it now to some of your tweets, your messages, your posts, and emails about the New World Order. And we're back. Full disclosure, a little bit of time has elapsed between when we started and when the tweet went out and where we are now, Joe. A little bit different, I would say. We've heard that there was a third member of this organization.
Yeah.
But whose side is she on? This third member.
The third man.
The third man. Not to misgender them or anything like that. But I mean, look, I want to give you a platform or whatever it is. It's your lovely podcast. How you doing? You know?
Good.
Yeah.
we have a daughter. We are parents.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to be like all just like, oh, I love it. It's so amazing. And Joe's so incredible. I want to give you the space and latitude to say that. But yeah, from me at the very least, I want you to know that you have been so amazing during this, making podcasts about some of the weirdest people that we've ever done podcasts about while growing an amazing little human inside of you.
It's been a pretty crazy journey when you think about it, like going all the way back to the beginning of the podcast. Like, we started this when we had just met, pretty
More or
much.
less, yeah.
Like, we'd known each other less than a year.
And, obviously our lives have changed greatly. The world of wrestling has changed greatly.
Yeah.
But, the curiosity to learn more about the world of wrestling is always there. And I just think this episode in particular has been very special from my perspective, because so much of the last kind of like 3 to 4 months in particular has been like being, sat with you, curled up in bed.
Yeah, heavily pregnant,
yeah. Feeling this baby kick up a storm while we're watching months and months of old Nitros and WCW. Like for me, forever now, like the NWO and golden era WCW is associated with like that period right before or Baby Girl was brought into this world. But how are you doing though overall? You good?
Yeah. Tired.
Yeah.
Think it's to be expected. I know you're the same way.
Yeah, we're
tired,
working in shifts.
Don't see each other as much as we used to.
But we're also awake a lot more than we used to be as well.
That's
so
true.
It's kind of part and parcel of that.
Yeah.
But
very rewarding.
Very rewarding.
She's great. She's very cool.
We're unique parents in that we think that our child is the most beautiful, coolest, most well behaved.
We're not posting pictures. You'll just have to believe us.
You'll just have to believe us that our little onion is the best onion of all.
Yeah.
And we love her to bits. She's incredible. And she's already watched a shitload of wrestling before anyone knows.
A lot of shit wrestling as well. You've put her through, especially like...
Yeah, it's funny because we literally ended the previous bit by being like, 99, the whole thing went completely to crap. I'm like, well, baby, it's time for you and I to watch all of 1999. So she's seen lots of Ric Flair versus Eric Bischoff and the NWO Wolfpack Elite and all sorts of just awful shite.
She showed her Ring of Glory wrestling.
She saw Ring of Glory wrestling as well.
Poor
thing. She's had almost as bad as you in terms of the early days of like she's just seeing a real rogues gallery or whatever. But too early to tell if she's a wrestling fan or if she's completely perturbed by it. We are getting, of course, at this point in time, very excited about like, what will her first wrestling show be? Will we get to take her to there's like a cute baby that shows up to these Future Shock wrestling shows in Manchester. And
it's been very inspirational for us, like on my journey of pregnancy, being like, maybe that can be us someday.
I mean, it's so weird because it's like we're literally at like barely into the second week here, folks. So everything's so new.
Yeah.
Her eyes are opening and all that. She has met Uncle Adam and Uncle Billy.
Yeah.
And she's done very, very well so far with guests and visitors. And the smile on your face, dear Lord.
My face. Yeah, it's on your face.
We do have, of course, some tweets to get into with regards to this. Unfortunately, it's been a crazy couple of weeks, as you can imagine, all things being considered.
Yeah.
So thank you for bearing with us and whatnot.
And thank you for being on our whole journey.
Yes.
Anyone who's been around from the very beginning, I imagine this could be a little bit emotional maybe for you as well. Like,
It's strange at the very least.
it is strange, but it's kind of nice that we've got, I feel through this podcast, we've got like a lot of big milestones recorded
Sure, yeah.
kind of for us and for her maybe someday. And it's just really nice to have like so many people kind of with us on this really happy journey of our lives.
Yeah, and we have been waiting, honestly, until this episode was kind of out to kind of, tell everyone. Obviously the immediate friends and family have kind of found out first and all that. But it is like, we felt supported the entire way because obviously doing this podcast, it's our job, doing it from our home, and knowing that we had like people supporting us and stuff like that throughout the way. And like, it's just loads of random kind words. I know people have reached out on various social platforms. I had a lot of dads in my Instagram messages just, giving me, sound advice and all that, which it's helped so much, and just the enthusiasm and the love and all that has been amazing.
It's been so nice. It's been so nice. It really feels like we're part of a little community.
Yes, and it does feel that way. And it's been this podcast has been going for what, like 12 years now?
Years, yeah.
Thereabouts. So, if you've been on the journey with us, hey, hell of a decade and a bit there. Well, before we announce the next episode and before we get too enamored with ourselves and our lovely little daughter, we'll read out a couple of these nice messages and tweets, etc. about the NWO. And I'm I'm really happy we did this episode when we did it, because it was such a big undertaking in so many ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, everyone who reached out at the end of the last episode as well with recommendations and stuff to check out, thank you very, very much. Some here over from patreon.com/howtowrestling, where you can join us, of course, through all of our pay-per-view reviews, pay-per-view classics, support the show, keep it ad-free and all that good stuff. From Woodstove here, I think something that gets overlooked is how smart a lot of the initial NWO booking was. They attacked Beefcake and the Nasty Boys to send a message to the smart fans that this was a different Hulk Hogan. Nash's interviews are gold for how much attention they paid to the NWO initially, like vetoing merch and making it look like it had been designed by the WCW, and Match's other wrestlers are insisting that nothing the NWO related could ever appear on the taped show because the WCW would edit it out. Unfortunately, after Sean Waltman was fired, Hall and Nash stopped caring about the details. And I think, you know what, I know trying to think back to before you gave birth is quite hard, but two things did stick with me a lot. One was the kind of, I think, the consensus that Sean Waltman 6 was so important in that whole business, and I think he was the missing ingredient in so much of it when it was not hitting the same way.
Yeah. Next up, from Musically Kayfabe, most overrated stable of all time. But it made WCW a legit threat to WWF, but they really over-egged the pudding, just putting the majority of the roster in the group.
Yeah, I think that just because it ends badly and its overarching kind of story is inconclusive, I still, I will bang this drum until the end of days. Folks, there's so much good stuff there. There's so much of the exact vibe and so much of the stuff that people want from a wrestling show. Hey, if you like great matches and all that jazz, you can fill your boots in this day and age. But that kind of like unpredictable chaos, that kind of cutting edge feeling without a million people tearing it down as it's happening in real time, like that is all there, still perfectly ready to enjoy. So like it's the perfect antidote to too much good wrestling is a bit of garbage that is really compelling.
Yeah.
From Mike Peacock here, this group may have given us the most interesting phase of Hulk Hogan ever. I wholeheartedly agree with you there. A shame he politicked it all to hell, and the true heart and soul of the NWO was always Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Sean Waltman, and they probably should have ended it in 1998.
Yeah.
Agreed to all of the above there, Mike.
Next, from Tez Donegan, I believed in the WWF propaganda that DX were bigger than them, which was maybe true post-1998.
Oh man, the DX episode after you've done this is going to be...
it's going to be infuriating.
It will wind you up to no end.
We're going to do that before the Triple H episode.
Maybe it feels like it needs, because like we're doing the Shawn Michaels episode, it feels like there's certain parts we need to do to kind of lessen the burden of the Triple H episode. Yeah. So maybe it would be a good show. Yeah.
Okay. I believed in the WWF propaganda that DX were bigger than them, which was maybe true post-1998, but even Brett said they modelled 1997 Heart Foundation on the NWO.
Matt Quintilla here. My childhood bedroom had an old chalkboard on it in the upper left-hand corner where I kept track of the NWO and WCW's respective victories. There was a point system that made sense in my adolescent brain, whereby a decisive win counted for 3 points, a technicality counted for 2, and attacking somebody outside of a match counted for 1. By the time the company closed down in 2001, the NWO was around 200 points ahead of WCW.
Now from Hitman CFR. The first months of the NWO in 96 are pivotal for pro wrestling. The Nitro where they jump on, Ray, etc. backstage is so well shot and performed by all involved. They were a threat to everyone's livelihoods. And then they lose that vibe soon after, and it goes downhill quick.
Yeah, strong agree there. From the Geek Critique, as someone who started watching wrestling at the exact moment when Eric Bischoff always says he knew WCW was dead, which was August 1998, by the way.
Really?
Talk about really diminishing your own legacy there,
Yeah.
but whatever. One thing I see constantly get overlooked is just how insanely over the Wolfpack was in 1998. If the original NWO codified the cool heel, the Wolfpack was that dynamic turned babyface. But WWE's version of history tends to gloss over it as just another lame offshoot, and is another reason why the finger poke of doom was such an awful idea. It threw out nearly a year's worth of storytelling, sure, but also turned an entire team heel who the fans really loved just so Hulk Hogan could be in it.
Yeah.
And we were shocked, even though I don't think you and I loved the kind of the sense of the Wolfpack storyline.
No.
The fans, they were into it at such another, they were reacting more for that than the original NWO,
Yeah.
and it was cheers, and it wasn't ironic or anything like that. They loved them all as good guys, and watching some of that 99 stuff where Hogan is Wolfpack Hogan, and now he's speaking like this in a real kind of monotone, Well, the Wolfpack is all about this, Jack, as opposed to being that kind of cartoon, over-the-top villain. It's he just couldn't help himself. I think Hulk couldn't help be extremely entertaining, and then couldn't help, that was never enough.
Yeah.
He couldn't be over and entertaining and have an extra career. You had to have it all and stop everyone else from having anything. What an idiot he is.
Yeah.
What a delightfully talented idiot he was.
Next from Max Cooldown. Every time that theme plays, I want to stab my ears with a screwdriver. I love it.
I thought, because we heard it so often, I was because I started an NWO era WCW rewatch in 2009 with my friend I went to WrestleMania with, and we stopped watching because the NWO theme got on our
Yeah,
nerves
you said
so
that,
much.
yeah.
And literally, you would be falling asleep, being like, night, night, and all of a sudden, and you'd look up and it's just Virgil and Scott, don't worry. Oh my God.
Oh my God, it's Virgil.
Yeah, you should listen to more Jimi Hendrix. I think my dad already loves Joe because she listens to Yes and loads of prog. It's going to turn out now, oh, by the way, she's giving you a granddaughter and she likes Jimi Hendrix.
Now from Trent NA25, my hot take is the NWO was still decent till late 98, maybe even early 99. No other faction ever came close to how cool they were.
I mean, I enjoyed a lot of the mid to late 98 stuff. It's still a mess, but it's almost like the fans didn't realize throughout night. There is after Starrcade 97, there is that kind of big letdown period, but it's still so much happening, and I think because no one in the group seemed to have realized it yet, almost, if they still were acting like it was over. It's when you get into that period in 99 when everyone is kind of they think what they're doing is lame.
Yeah.
Then once the wrestlers don't think it's cool anymore, no fan is ever going to think it's cool unless you're brain melt or something like that. Couple here from Blue Sky, where you can follow us at How To Wrestling over there in the Blue Sky if you like a perhaps slightly less politically polarized environment for your messages into new episodes. Elliot Baker here. The NWO was my first introduction to wrestling as a child. I still believe they were the perfect dark cartoon supervillains to introduce a new fan even past their peak. To me, it felt like WCW was Gotham City, Sting was Batman, and the NWO were the assorted villains that had taken over.
Yeah.
Very good parallel there. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And Alice's last name here, I really did miss out on the NWO's days in WCW, so my only contemporary experience of them was seeing the 2002 WWE run and being confused as to why Hulk Hogan would be a threat to anyone at that stage. It's funny.
That leg drop, brother.
I mean, it's a devastating hold, Joe. What is wild to me is that, because we're approaching that era right now in the SmackDown Crawl for the Attitude Era podcast, where Hogan is just meant to be this old legend from another era. He's younger than a lot of the roster is currently. He's roughly the same age as LA Knight and Seth Rollins and all them, and he's meant to be this bygone
Old
relic
man.
from another. Yeah, Hey, isn't it great? You could be in your late 40s now and still be a young dude.
Yeah, and it's all those stem cells. We just needed to give Hogan a bunch of stem cells, and he could have kept doing that leg drop for another 20 years.
Yeah, another 20 years. You would have continued living for those 20 years as well. You maintain that also? Yeah, maybe.
well.
Look, I can't wait for the next 10 years for me to become a young man. That's all I'm
Yeah.
saying. Next episode, folks, which we are going to get to in a second. Just to remind you can support the show at patreon.com/howtowrestling, where, hey, if you like this episode, there's loads of great WCW goodies over there from our pay-per-view Classic series, including NWO Sold Out. And we also had a recent offering where we looked at just right before we got the NWO, where we had WCW trying to figure out what the fuck they're going to do with themselves. And the answer to that, Joe, was lots of cages.
Loads of cages stacked on top of each other.
Many men inside those cages died to bring you the NWO. You can check all that out for as little as $5 a month to get access to nearly a decade's worth of content over there. The next episode, Joe, is someone who returned to WWE in the last year, had a lot of excitement around it, and it feels like we've barely seen her since.
Yeah, I feel it's all fizzled out.
Part of me was so excited for AJ Lee to return because she was always like this thing I was almost like keeping from you. When we've done all these episodes with other people, like the Bella Twins and Lita and Trish and Luna, we've done so many women on this show. We've not done AJ Lee, who I think is probably most of our listeners' favorite wrestler.
Yeah.
Like, she is exciting. Now, you've seen a little bit of her in WWE. She had a tag match. She was in the War Games. Has it given you much of an indication of who she is or what she's about so far?
Not really. She said some really cringe stuff.
Like what, Joe?
Sometimes I'm gonna shank a bitch.
Now, I will endeavor, as always, the challenges is laid down where it's like, there's a wrestler who's easily going to be come across as the coolest, best thing ever.
I'm worried she's aged. And I don't mean this in like terms of like her appearance or anything, but I worry...
She looks amazing. She looks exactly the goddamn same, except more muscular.
Yeah, if anything, she looks better than ever. But I do worry if her character, her personality has maybe, like her gimmick has aged badly.
I remember her...
It feels like a bit of a relic.
I mean, definitely, but also like a relic from a time when women's wrestling had kind of regressed a little bit, and she helped really, like, long before we were marketing it as like, oh, a Divas Revolution or Evolution or whatever it was, she was like at the coalface, boots on the ground. Like, I remember going to the snooker bar with Adam and Billy and us being like, say what you will, that 5-minute women's match with AJ, that was like probably the match of the night. Like, she literally like made believers of one of the most skeptical fan bases without them being marketed to about women's wrestling being super important and great suddenly.
It's going to be interesting discussions, I think, to be sure, to be had around her, because the thing that I'm not sure has aged well is this whole idea of like, I'm the cool girl. I'm the girl that's not like other girls.
And a lot of people identified with that.
I know, but I feel like we've kind of moved past that as a society.
That is like kind of something that feels a little bit from 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And obviously the pivot is still happening and we're going to see that play out. She's written a book. She's been very, very open about the difficulties that she had in the wrestling business, specifically in the WWE.
Yes, she has eaten plates of shit.
She sure has.
Like, even I know that.
You know, plates of shit that would make her husband seem like he's barely been to the buffet at all. And she's written a tell-all book that I'm really excited to get to grips with. We're going to talk all about it. We're going to watch all of her classic matches. Hopefully we'll see some of her more contemporary stuff and a lot of the stuff that she's done kind of in between, because she is a bit of a jack of all trades. She's done everything from writing comics and manga to producing wrestling shows herself.
Wow.
So I think we have a lot of AJ Lee super fans, and we won't just have to rely on my kind of nostalgic memories of her from, 15 or so years ago kicking ass on WWE television. So if you have any of your favorite matches, memories, or what she as a character has meant to you personally, we'd love to hear it. Our next episode, How to AJ Lee. You can, of course, leave us a message on any of the social platforms, over on the Patreon page, patreon.com/howtowrestling, or you can even email us, howtowrestling@gmail.com, and any and all information about upcoming episodes, the recommended bonus viewing for this episode, and links to all the previous episodes, related episodes, all that good stuff, howtowrestling.com. We've got a very hungry baby here who you may not realize has been breastfeeding on Joe the entire time.
I'm sorry about any random noises she's let loose. She just did a big gasp of air there.
Kids are natural. What do you think? Next episode, How to AJ Lee. And thank you for joining us on this easily the most unique episode of How to Wrestling I think we've ever done. An episode of two halves.
Yes,
Joe.
for sure.
I think your voice sounds completely different in both of these. Thank you to everyone for all the love and support. We'll see you next time. And until then, it's going to be a goodbye from me, Kevin.
And a goodbye from me, Joe.
And we'll see you next time on How to Wrestling.
See ya.